tall is it going to be?
This is the notice I was looking at. Right, so this was for county contracts. It was at 1320. We don't have anyone, well, unless we want to look at our contract.
No, that's actually the rate that I was, when I
Okay. All right, good evening, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. When Commissioner Ross is ready. Just for the audience sake, Vice Mayor Johnson Sardella is available by phone this evening. She had an emergency, so she's asked to be put in by phone, so she will be actually listening and participating that way this evening, okay? Just want you to see, so we'll do a roll call with her in it, so. Okay, meeting is called to order. It is 6:33. A roll call, Madam Clerk.
Mayor Trumpman,
Here?
Vice Mayor Johnson Sardella,
Vice Mayor
Commissioner-
Sardella, you'll need to speak up.
Commissioner
Yes,
Bill?
I'm here.
Okay. Commissioner Bill? Here. Commissioner Tudor? Here. Commissioner Ross? Here.
Okay, thank you. Pledge allegiance, everybody stand, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands,
Which stands one nation,
under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We're going to go ahead, I'm going to go ahead and open it up for public comments. I know that's not on the agenda, but that's a tradition we have here, so I'd like to go ahead and do that, so open for public comments. And please don't forget to, do we have a sign-in?
I
Do we
will.
have a sign-in?
I will.
Okay,
It's
there's
here.
a sign-in, so please go ahead and sign in as well. Thank you.
Janie Anderson, 11th Place, 119th Street. Just a reminder, last week I emailed all of you, referenced the Miami-Dade County minimum living wage, sent you this notice, which actually lists that wage as either $15.11 or $16.15, depending on contractual issues. As well as I sent the ordinance, you all know my reasoning behind opposing this. In a year where we're hearing monies anywhere from $200,000 to $300,000 in terms of what we're going to lose when Homestead kicks up, we've got to focus on that which is going to have the greatest impact to quality of life and property values. My second request, in reading through the budget, where you would see line items for part-time salaries, it's just one aggregate amount. Would it be possible to break that out and show how many positions are in that and what the approximate hours would be for all those positions? It makes it just a little bit clearer than just the aggregate amount. Thanks.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Hang on a second. I'll notice because I give it right back to you. No, this.
Oh.
If you don't mind, because I have it too, but I don't have it in front of me. Thanks. Chuck Ross, 11166 Griffin Boulevard. I went back and I looked. It's kind of interesting because I know we're worried about what's going to happen with ad valorem taxes, et cetera. And back in the year ending September '09, our ad valorem property taxes were $1,568,000, call it $1,600,000. The next year ended 10, the year that Rock's her first year in office, it went to $1,400,000. The next year, 11, went to $1,100,000. We had about a $450,000 to $500,000 drop in property value on ad valorem and other revenues in about 2 years, and we survived. So I think we need to be focusing on the long term, and one of the things that benefits our village is quality employees. Now, the only reason I wanted to go over this notice Janie's correct. The point about the 1511 to the 1320 is the 1320 is those that have qualifying health benefits, and the 1511 per hour is those that don't. And I ran a calculation, and I didn't find, based on 3 employees, I think the effect was about, including FRS and payroll taxes, about 10 grand. One more note. If you're looking for a place, if you're concerned about shaving some money, you can start with your own salaries. The cost of the salaries for the commission and payroll taxes is about $13,000. So I proposed this before, that essentially commission salaries be eliminated and there be substituted an expense reimbursement policy. You could have a certain amount of a pool of money that you can use. Whatever is not used gets carried over, and it can be used for anything that's related to your job, which could be educating yourself, or hosting a party for the employees, or the staff, et cetera, or rather the residents, et cetera. So you could come where in the middle. Let's say you left $1,000 for each commissioner, so that'd be $5,000. I think the budget is $21,000 this year, so we're talking about $12,000 as opposed to 21, and then you have some extra money for the employees. Thank you.
Good evening. David Raymond, 11520 Northeast 9th Avenue. Nice to see you all. Thank you for your work. And before I comment on the budget, I just want to say that I really appreciate the weekly reports that Christian puts out. They're very helpful and keep you advised and feel like you know what's going on, not just when you're going up and down the street, but you know what's going on behind the scenes. So thank you for that. It's very refreshing and nice. In terms of the budget, you guys did a good job on the budget. I know it's a tough decision to go through. I looked at the wonderful 150 plus pages that you put out there, and I know you've got a lot of things that was just on what went out tonight, I assume. I realize there's other parts to it, and I know there's a lot there. I guess one question I would just throw out, I know you can't answer it, but just to consider, when I was with the county, we could only budget 95% of estimated taxes under state law. I guess it's the same for the ad valorem, right? So, but usually you wind up getting 100% of those taxes, even though you can't budget there. So the shortfall, maybe, I know you got to balance the budget, but maybe I don't know how other municipalities are planning for this, or if that's anything that you've looked at or discussed with any other small, neighboring communities, and what they've done. Maybe you've already done all that homework, but maybe somebody's done that. I know we always had a reserve fund in my department that we used to kind of cushion the 5%, because we knew pretty much unless something bad happened, we were going to get that. And we were funded through a different tax, through a food and beverage tax, but also we couldn't budget the whole thing. So we had reserves, and we budgeted out of the reserves, and then when the tax came in at 100%, we replenished the reserves. Anyway, maybe you've already looked at all that or done all that. And then the only other thing selfishly I'll raise is just the issue of our street, and I know Christian is working on that, and some other streets that I've noticed that are getting a lot of this, I don't know what you call it, alligatoring or snaking or whatever, all of these little, where it floods, and we have it, there's some more over right down the block here.
Base failure, it's called.
I'm sorry?
It's base failure is what it's called.
What is it?
Base failure.
Okay, yeah, so there's quite a few spots like that, so it's beyond just the flooding part that those, I don't know if that's what happens in the long run. And I appreciate the fact this year the CIT budget is actually presented in there. In past years, I think it was kind of a separate document, so hopefully there's some monies in there, and I know Christian's working on different solutions for those bad areas. So I wish you all the good energy and good thoughts in what you have to deliberate to get through the budget process. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dave. Anybody else for public comments? Okay, we'll close the floor to public comments. I know we left off, if I'm not mistaken, we left off with a few more sections to present, so I'd like to go ahead and continue on that. We were left off, I think if I'm not mistaken, it was 8, was that right? No, we went through 8, so we were on co-compliance?
Marlon, do you have agendas? Agendas?
We did do building, but I don't think we did, I don't think we... Thank you. Public Works, I don't believe we did do. No. So we still have Public Works, Road Fund, CITT, and Sanitation. Is that correct? I don't think we did building or code either. Right, so we're going to, so if it's acceptable, I'd like to go ahead and add those in order, so we'll do building and then code. Does that work for everybody? Oh, we did do building. Yes, we did, because I asked about the building officials, so we did do building. I'm not sure if we did code.
I think we did code, I think we ended at Public Works, did we not?
Okay.
We discussed.
Village manager?
We talked about the landlord permitting and.
That's right, I know, I said we did building. I'm just not sure we did code. I just want to make sure we did code. Did we do code? Because I'm trying to remember.
Those expenditures are under code.
I think,
Yes, we did code.
okay. I did have one question on that, if I may just ask it. This is for our finance manager. On page 8 of 15 for code, I just want to have a quick question on landlord permit inspectors. Should that be moved to the building department, or should that be in code?
I'm not sure.
Currently, that's done either by our building official or our code officer.
Yeah, so that was one of my questions, where it belongs, and I guess that's going to depend
think
where you're
it's-
using it.
Yeah, realistically,
Is-
I think it's fine in code.
I just want to make sure that when my concern was that just when you're paying for it, if it ends up moving to the other location, that there's some notation there that depending on where it's being funded, you have the ability to access it on either line item. That was my thought. Okay. Okay, so we'll go ahead and move to Public Works. Village manager.
Okay, Public Works, overall, our budget is down 2% on this one. We can't discuss, because of union contract negotiations, we can't discuss salaries or the benefits publicly, because those collective bargaining agreements are under discussion right now. So that one we'll have to avoid publicly, and we'll have an executive session to discuss those. After that, we can move on to the individual worksheets. And does the commission have any questions, or?
I just had one on the manager's position that we had talked about. I know I had discussions previously about the thoughts of adding a worker to that and using a lot of that money for the tree trimming. I know that we had kind of had a discussion on that. I wanted to, excuse me, I just wanted you to share your thoughts on that.
We can do that, absolutely. And
Okay.
so we definitely need another worker in Public Works.
So if
And
we,
so just to,
what salary range did you suggest for that?
I would say probably the 25 to 30 range, just speculating, but again, that would all be union, so I can't,
Right,
would have to go look.
theoretically, I said range so that we're not,
Theoretically,
okay. So we can discuss that off session to do that? Okay. Makes sense.
So do we have to make any sort of official about the salaries
Well, the manager is, if I'm not mistaken, is a non-bargaining.
That's a non-union.
Right,
yeah.
so we could discuss about the fact of changing that to a laborer, but not the cost of that position until we do private. Okay, so would it be possible then, since that's under consideration, and since we are looking at that anyway, to have an executive session prior to our,
Prior to the commission meeting and
Before the
our
budget
hearings,
hearing, yes. Okay.
And so, I believe, Commissioner Ross, did you have something, or am I?
I'm trying to follow an executive session to discuss the union contract?
For Public Works, the Painters Union.
Okay.
And so-
Okay.
I feel a little bit out of the loop, so I'm just trying to catch up on your conversation.
Sorry.
Okay. All right. So, is there any other questions for Public Works?
Yes.
Go ahead, Commissioner Ross.
So the budget that was distributed to us on Saturday showed the 2016 Dodge Durango. I understand now that's been moved back to the police department because it was originally a police lease.
It has?
When you look at the property and liability insurance, though, under Public Works, it still shows $3170 for 5 automobiles rather than 4. So that's worksheets 12 and 13.
I think that's for the 2 Gators as well as the 2 Dodge trucks and then the flatbed.
So although the Durango was...
Yeah, the
in,
Durango was moved.
The Durango's insurance was not in.
No, there's 2 Dodge trucks in Public Works.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm saying the budget that was distributed to us on Friday showed the Durango and 5 insured cars.
Okay.
And then the update shows no Durango and still 5 insured cars.
And still 5 insured vehicles? Okay. Give me just a second to check on that, please.
And while they're doing that, I just want to thank you for, under rentals and leases, I noticed you decreased the water cooler costs and made them very accurate, and I also want to thank you for making a lot of these figures very precise. I know the finance managers work very hard to make sure we have really real numbers, and not just, so that they're very accurate numbers throughout the budget. And I know she's spent a lot of time on that, so I just, while she's looking things up, I wanted to make a comment that I appreciate that.
Yeah, we'll have to update that to remove 1 vehicle.
Okay,
So,
so,
and when you look at that vehicle fleet, the fleet list that we got, it shows the 5 PWs, including the Durango. So that insurance premium is going to go down when you move it to...
Right, right.
good pick up. Thank you, Commissioner Ross. Anything else?
Yes. We've all gotten plenty, I think of Public Works as sort of everything outside, building maintenance and sort of everything outside in the common areas of the village. And so we've all gotten plenty of email from residents complaining about a excessive population of cats. We have worked from time to time with Sally and with other municipalities to do spay and neuter events. The last time I spoke to Commissioner Hayman's office about it was about a year and a half ago, and I was told that the events are, that the commissioner would like to see some kind of local effort, monetary money put in to put an event like that together for the community, rather than just rely on the commissioner's office to put it together. So
Okay.
I think that this is the appropriate place for us to earmark $2,000 to go towards a spay and neuter event to address some of those issues that our residents are complaining about.
We can certainly do that. In addition, on the spay and neuter, I was speaking with David Raymond, in fact, and he suggested a group that, or an organization that he knows. Currently, what they do, if we call in, I believe, the county, they will pick up the feral cats or stray cats that are caught, spay, neuter them, and bring them back and drop them off immediately.
and there's
in the
no
same
cost,
location.
correct?
So,
Being that this is something that you're working on with him, would it be possible in this case to get accurate figures?
yeah, absolutely.
Would you please come on up to the speaker? Thank you.
So, hello again. So I serve on the board of the Miami Veterinary Foundation. There's only 2 of us on the board that aren't vets, so these are really nice people. They're all veterinarians. We have a contract with Miami-Dade County for $300,000 a year. Sally Heyman is very active in getting us, she's in fact the lead on this for the county, getting us the money. We have a network of 27 vets currently, including the closest one is Miami Shores. You can go to Miami Shores Veterinary on 103rd. Anybody who has a community cat here, if there's a cat in your front yard that you know is a stray, you can take them over there. It's free. They bill us, they bill our program for it, and then we bill the county. We currently have a donor who just gave us a good sum of money to hire trappers, because what happens with the community cats, and I know Commissioner Ross and I had a brief discussion about past efforts, and I think part of the issue is that the release and recovery of the cats. So if they just trap them and spay them and then let them go, for the females, they need a day or two to kind of, rest and recover in particular. So we've contracted with groups of local trappers that will come, set the traps, pick up the cats, have them fixed through the network of vets. They give them the rabies shots and deworm them and do some other stuff that they might need. And there's no cost whatsoever, so you wouldn't have to budget for that. I know I sent Christian a write-up, and I forwarded to the mayor a couple weeks ago after you called me. And we also can put a flyer out, which I've done on Nextdoor, for people who have community cats, just to bring them in. So I think you could probably save your money. The county's already giving us the money for the spay and neuter part that pays the vets, and our foundation is paying for the trappers. So, and we do want to do a little public education piece.
I'm saying that may where the money, yeah.
So people don't worry that we're going to trap Fluffy and bring Fluffy in, and all of a sudden Fluffy has her ear tipped. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you so much. So,
I guess I've got one comment about it. I've seen a letter also from one of our residents about it, and his concern was not the fact whether the cats were neutered or not. He just didn't want the cats in his front yard doing their business there. And I would imagine neutering him would not make any difference. So I don't know I have no idea what the solution is. But neutering them, it'd be a great idea to neuter them, but that's not going to solve those people's problems.
okay, but Ellen, I'll give you an example. We have a resident now that has 2 pregnant cats. They're probably going to give a litter of anywhere from 6 to how many cats that's going to be. They're going to have cats. I just got one from that litter that I am working to try to rehome. The issue is you have to stop the breeding at some point. Fortunately or unfortunately, outdoor cats live much less longer lives than do indoor cats. So the rule is if they're going to do this, they're at least you're stopping the flow. There's a male cat right now that's running around, and he's breeding, and I've tried to trap him, and I haven't been able to be successful at it yet. But I think having professional trappers here that at least minimize, that's a start. It's not the ideal solution for all animals to remain wild and not have homes that are domestic animals. I agree with you, especially in our city, and any city for that matter. But we have to start somewhere, and I think we have some funding to do that, and I think it's at least a good start.
Mm-hmm. Now, let me get back to Commissioner Ross's request earlier. I believe Commissioner Heyman, when she does her events for this, it's usually for people, not necessarily for stray cats, it's for their own cats. And I think that's we did that a couple of years ago, and we had a great turnout. So I think, putting aside a couple $1,000s for that to support Commissioner Heyman and that particular project would be excellent.
So this is for spayed and neutering?
For spaying and neutering. It's of people's own cats, or people that have a cat and can't necessarily afford to.
Well, let me just say this, because I spoke to David Raymond about this. There already is a program, is my point, in which people who don't have the income can apply. And can you just talk to that very quickly? I'm sorry. Because I just don't want to double put funding in money if there's already something already funded.
So the county has a mobile van that there's some issues with right now, by the way, because we have a clinic that, again, through the Miami Veterinary Foundation, that's located at Camilla's house the first Sunday of every month, and it's free veterinary services for low-income people, veterans, and homeless people. However, the Miami-Dade Animal Services is there with their spay and neuter bus, which is a converted bus that they have, and anybody can come and bring their dog and cat in there. They don't have to be income qualified. But for the last 2 months, the bus they've had problems with staffing, they've had problems with the bus, so they haven't been there. So it's kind of hit or miss, where they're not going to be here this coming week. So there's some issues there. But if you're a low-income person who can't afford it, you can go to Miami Shores Veterinary, show them proof of low income, a Jackson card, food stamp, something like that, and pay a $20 copayment and have your animal fixed. You can also go to the Humane Society for like $10. I'm not suggesting you don't put the money in the budget for it, but there's a whole bunch of resources out there when you're having a tight budget year that I don't know if you need to put that out there.
I appreciate all that. This is a problem that we have been just holding our noses and sort of ignoring for quite a while now. And understanding that now there are county funds and other donations out there and resources, some of those solutions may not apply or may not be attainable, reachable. Some of our elderly residents may not have access to pick up their cats or dogs and take them down to some location out downtown or somewhere else. We've had an event like this before offered here, and it was booked. You make your appointment in advance, people come in, they line up their cats, and all day long the vets are there spaying and neutering. I think it was a very successful event. I think our residents would really appreciate it, and for the small price of setting aside $2,000, maybe we won't use it all, maybe we can find another way of funding it, that would be great. But I don't want to go by another year without our putting the local effort in and having it here in town easily accessible for residents.
Just to make sure there's no other comments, I'm just going to reach out here. Vice Mayor Sardella, do you have any comments on this?
No, I do not.
Okay, thank you. Any other commissioners? Support? Not support? My feeling is it's already being funded. I think this is redundancy funds. If we do this, I would rather see the money go to the trappers, and I'd like to see the education piece go on, and that's where I'd like to see some money go to. I have no problem putting some money aside. I'm not sure having the van to do that. I don't know what the cost is. Can we reach out to Commissioner Hayman and get a specific dollar amount that they're looking for to do this? Are they looking for specific amounts? Have you already done so?
I have asked her for what it costs them, and I didn't actually get the sum, but I did get the information that she's looking for a local effort on these things. And perhaps because she had a plan to do, the funding through an agency, but those services may not be accessible to our elderly residents who don't get around so easily, and I'd like to have it offered here locally for them.
That's the decision.
We're talking about $2,000, folks. It's not a lot of money in the whole scheme of things.
Well, and we are limited on what we can do as far as controlling the cat population. We've had a lot of resident complaints about that, so this would just be one more thing that doesn't cost much, but will be helpful in that fight.
I think it'll show a tremendous amount of goodwill for those residents that are facing the problem day in and day out.
Will that truck, if brought in trapped cats, take those cats, or is that going to be a separate issue and only be homeowners?
No, in this particular instance, this is, they bring it, I believe, the vets to the rec center. This is how we did it a couple of years ago.
Okay.
And residents who had animals that had not been spayed or neutered yet were able to bring theirs in for free and get them spayed and neutered at the rec center. And so that was the way it worked. They made appointments, it was appointment driven, and they were busy all day. So it was a very successful event, and I think it's a good thing to do. Commissioner Hayman has been a huge supporter of us, and I think it's also a way for us to show support for her and her programs as well.
Okay.
Yeah, I like the idea of the program, putting people out if they want to bring in their house cat or their dog, and because they can't afford or because they want to get it moved or spayed for free. But it doesn't really solve the whole issue of why this whole conversation is coming up. The whole reason this conversation is coming up is because the feral and stray cats. And there's really, there's already programs in place in Miami-Dade County where they will take the animals, spay and neuter them, but all they're going to do is release them right back into the village, and then you're going to have the same problem with certain residents who their concern is not that there's an unfixed cat walking around, it's the fact that there's an outdoor cat that's using the restroom in their yard, it's spraying their plants, it's doing this, it's doing that. So unfortunately, I don't think the trap, neuter, and release program, while a good first step, is really going to resolve the issue has been coming forward to the commission by some very local residents.
But there's another issue here, which is the issue of cat leash laws and things like that, which is not a budget hearing question. This is more of a conversation for the commission. But the suggestions and the things that are going on here, we have to have a starting point. And I think you have to start by stopping the breeding. I think if not what? You just let them keep breeding? You can't remove them. You can't kill them. You can't cull them. So at the end of the day, and I'm not suggesting you should, what I'm saying is you have to start somewhere. So I do believe you have to have a neutering program in place. I know South Beach had this problem. It was enormous. And they brought in tremendous amount. I know North Beach had this problem. So there is no other way around this. And if you bring in any agency, Humane Society and so forth, they're going to tell you minimally you have to trap. Okay? And then you also have to go towards the people who are feeding them and creating the problem in the first place. And that's a code issue. So the question, I believe there is, I don't believe that we shouldn't have some sort of money for, whether we it's part of the newsletter piece anyway, we can use as part of the education piece, we already have a budget for that. But I do believe we should definitely work with David Raymond and the group that he represents to try and trap some of these cats and get them fixed.
I have no problem with money.
I have 3 in my yard right now that I'm trying to trap.
I have no problem with monies being used to facilitate trapping the feral stray cats in
Okay.
order to get them into a TNR program. But I don't want anybody to think that that's a silver bullet for the problems
No.
with these cats in the village. But some people seem to, there's been some residents who are very vocal that believe that this somehow is a magic bullet. And it's not. They'll come back. Now, eventually their lifespan, like all living creatures, will end, and that'll end that cycle with that line of cats. But, I mean, if there's going to be any money set aside, it needs to be set aside, I would say, specifically for trapping the cats and getting them into a TNR program.
It's a complicated problem, and it's not one that's going to get addressed with only one solution. That's why I'm proposing some other alternatives besides using those free services that are available through the charity of the county. We're not going to get it resolved just one way, and I think that it will, as I say, show a tremendous amount of goodwill to our residents if we're responsive to what their issues are in more than one front.
Yeah, but the problem I have in this is the issue is if I'm a homeowner and I get this, and I'm not against helping out and getting things spayed and neutered. I'm actually for that. I'm actually think that's a really good thing. And if it's a couple $1,000s, I guess we can do that. I just don't think it's addressing the problem that we have. And where I'm having issues fiscally is deciding where the best bang for buck is going to be to get that done. And right now, we have funding for that. So, if you want to set aside some money, and that's what everybody wants to do, I think we should have a direction from the commission to let the manager know whether or not we're going to put aside $2,000 for the homeowners who already have animals, and maybe they're adopting some of them. Maybe that's the motivation to adopt some and get them fixed.
Maybe some
I
of
don't
those
know.
stray cats are coming into their yard and they're being fed, and you're right, so they're adopting them, and now they become their outside cat. I'm just trying to give more than one alternative for people and
see
making
that.
sure that people understand that we hear them and we're trying to address their concern.
Okay, is there direction from the commission and to do that? Or do you know, I mean, the answer is, the reality is, do you want to set aside, and I think the amount that you gave was $2,000. So if there isn't a fixed amount, would you consider doing something less significant maybe? I don't know if that would work for Commissioner Hayman, maybe $1,000 to do that, I'm trying to find a solution that's somewhere in the middle here.
Yeah, the $2,000 isn't really the issue I have. I just don't want to see that money earmarked towards.
Vice Mayor Johnson Sardella.
Okay.
I mean, I'm happy with finding a middle ground and setting aside something, but also I think I heard the mayor also say that there is an education aspect to this as well, with residents that are also feeding the cats, which is a code issue. And if, I don't know if this is something we need door hangers to go out or something up on the website to really keep this in the forefront of residents' minds about what happens when you have all this open feeding. It's just going to keep attracting.
Let me suggest this.
Okay. Just for 1 minute, just because I just want to make sure, because he got interrupted, I just want to make sure you had finished your thoughts, and then I'll come back.
Yeah, I was just saying that $2,000 setting aside for a program isn't what I don't have an issue with monetary amount. I just want to make sure it's being put towards something that I think really addresses the problem. The problem isn't people and their indoor cats or their canines that are not spayed or neutered. The issue that the park is having is with the stray and ferals. So I would like to see the money go towards trapping those in order to get them into a program to spay and neuter.
Which, right now, is something...
Okay, if I may, the issue is not only feral, and I wouldn't call them all feral. Some cats just are outdoor cats. People keep their cats outdoors. Code has been conducting a concentrated effort, and they've worked with the county to try to eliminate some of that, but it's an ongoing, continuing thing. As long as they procreate, they will continue to have cats. Commissioner Johnson Sardella made a good suggestion of maybe a door hanger or a concentrated effort in educating people about the outdoor feeding and about the impact that their lovely little stray outdoor cat has on their neighbors. So that would be an education piece that could be brought in. Let me suggest that we set aside $2,500 to address the issue and let the manager come up with a plan of whether it's going to be partnering with another municipality to bring in a mobile unit, having an event here at the village or close by, and also the education piece.
Commissioner? Did you...
Yeah, I think that would be a great idea. I like what David had said, is if you want to get your cat or animal spayed for free with the county, you have to show some sort of proof that, yeah, I'm not making $100,000 a year, I'm making $20,000 a year. I think the problem is feral cats. If people own their cats, it's their cat. They choose to own the cat. They do have a certain responsibility.
And if they feed them, they own them.
That's right. They feed them, they own them. Outside cat is a great idea. It's still your responsibility. I'm not sure how we can go about doing, but I think it's a great idea. Let's put $2,500 in the budget. Let Christian come up with some sort of idea, a program that we can use, and go from there.
Okay? So we have direction? Yes?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, we have a direction.
So we were adding
Yes.
$2,500.
Yes. Thank you. I had a few things, but I just want to make sure nobody else does before I go on this. Anybody else? Okay. On page 14 of 19, I'm going to suggest that where it says entrance sign landscaping, that we change the verbiage to entrance sign installation and landscaping, since we didn't spend the money this year to get the signs installed, that we basically, because it's $11,000, I think the intent there was not just for the landscaping, but for the installing of the
Installation.
sign and the installation, so just make the name change. The other thing was, instead of tree planting, we have a lot of trees at this point. I think one of the issues we have is the end capping on the medians is very, very in poor shape. And I'd like to see more that the money go towards end capping of the medians. I did speak to the Parks and Parkway Board about it. They seemed positive about the response when I talked to them. But I'd like to see the money go towards the ending so it's nice and clean on the ends versus planting more trees right now. It doesn't mean we can't plant trees. It just means I just like to see the money at this point go to that. At least it's not a lot of money, but it's $5,000, and we can maybe function on the avenues and some of the main streets that are most visible.
I think we have to plant a tree if we want to keep our Tree City USA designation.
We
Yeah.
do.
At least a tree.
Yes, no problem. I just would like to see, if you want to call it tree planting and end capping, that's fine. And then you can figure out the needs. I have no problem with that. The bridge landscaping, I just had a question, is do we really need $2,000 there, or could we do $1,000 there and use that other money towards maybe the end capping and add it over on the other side? I'd rather see that, because that's for everybody in the village.
Right now, we've got a lot of plants there that we need to replace that have either been eaten by iguanas or, some of the plants have died. So I'd like to keep that 2,000 there. Doesn't mean we have to spend it all.
Okay.
And I can always come back to the commission later and say, hey, we finished the bridge project and there's $1,000 left over. Would you like us to move that to the?
It's all in the same
impacts?
line item anyway. It's all in the same group anyway, so
It
you
is,
can move it
really.
around anyway. All right,
Okay.
no problem. And the only other question I had has to do with, I just want to be clear so everybody knows, there's a big outlay on page 19 of 19, which is the Bobcat Fast Cat Pro, which is a mower. I just want to make sure the public is aware. We do use our mowers quite significantly in the
We do.
village. And I just want you to kind of articulate the need there, so to understand why that outlay is there.
No, we have one mower that is aging out at this point, and it's starting to cost more in repairs. And so one of the items that I asked Public Works about is what tools they needed to keep moving forward, and they suggested a new lawnmower. And so they've looked and looked at the Bobcat Fast Cat Pro and have recommended that for purchase.
And is there a maintenance plan for that, or is that just a straight purchase?
I think that was just a straight purchase on that.
Can you look at to see what it might cost to at least have some sort of maintenance plan that's already
Absolutely.
with it? And to see if that's worth it, if it's worthy of that. Okay.
Caesar, do you know, is there a maintenance plan for this? No, there's not? Okay.
And if it's worth it. I mean, one of the things is sometimes these plans are, they do the first 3 years and the mower doesn't break. But since we're so, since we use it so heavily, it may be worth, and if you all think that's a good idea, if you don't think it's a good idea, talk to the manager and then decide. Thank you. Are there any other comments on Public Works? Nope, okay. We'll go ahead and move to Road Fund. And just make sure. Vice Mayor, is there any more comments on Public Works?
No, I did not have any more comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just would remind the commission that the workers in the road fund are the painters union as well, so.
Put us on mute, please. Thank you. Sorry. You can put us on mute, please. Thank you. Give me a minute. Vice Mayor, if you could put us on mute, please. Thank you. Sorry. Technology. So wonderful. Okay. Did you want to go ahead and start reviewing the road fund at all and talk about your thoughts with that?
Essentially, this is the road fund is funded by the local option sales or gas tax. And so it's money that comes in from the state, the county, and we use that for road repairs as well as median maintenance through FDOT. And it offsets also some of our public works salaries. So.
I think we are undergoing an audit right now, correct? We just, with the CITT audit?
Well, this is road fund. This is not CITT.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So that's-
I'm jumping ahead.
But yes, you're right. We are going under a CITT audit as well.
You have the audits on my mind, because we talked about them today.
And ours.
Okay. So on the road fund, is there any comments on the road fund?
Is the road fund money that comes into us from the county, and we have to spend on roads?
The road fund money that comes in is from the state.
From the state, okay?
Yes, it comes from
Right. So this is funded not by us, and it doesn't come in, it's not listed as revenues?
Correct.
And so whatever it comes in, it goes out. So whatever we get in, we have to spend or should spend.
So we try to balance the budget. I mean, this particular
in excess of $8,000, which would go into this fund's fund balance. And it also includes an operating transfer from the Sanitation Fund of $23,000 for a portion of the employees' salaries.
So the 8,000, is this an enterprise fund? We can have a positive balance year to year? Or it's got to be, we have to spend every dollar we get?
We can actually roll forward some funds without being penalized, but they are specific use funds. They have to be road-related, very similar to the CITT.
Okay.
Commissioner Ross?
Oh, question with the road fund, is it, I just noticed on Sunday, we were driving around and there was a tree limb fallen in the road. Clearing that tree limb, is that an appropriate use of the road fund?
Absolutely. Yep.
So with the $8,000 excess that is in there, perhaps we can earmark some of that money for clearing those types of situations where limbs are creating a hazard on the road.
Yes,
And
definitely.
that will add to our tree trimming. It's not used for tree trimming for aesthetic, but tree trimming to clear the road so that it's not impeding traffic.
And any equipment that we're using to remove that tree limb? I know we talked about things like hurricanes, and we had our experience this weekend removing a tree limb for us.
Oh, you took care of that.
I did take care of that, so did Mike. We removed a tree limb on 117th that had broken, so it was our
But,
weekend fun.
And B, you may know the answer to this. Can we use this for rental for a lift truck, that sort of thing, for tree trimming?
Yes, yes, you can.
So the 3,000 we have right now could be enhanced by that 8,000, which is a great thought, Commissioner
That
Ross.
is.
Good use.
And put that to great use, yes. Because I know the lift trucks, and also, I don't know if the Ford Interceptor, if they're using the wench component, if we could use any of that towards that as well?
We could essentially move over some things that are road-related from the general fund into this.
Okay.
And use up that $8,000.
My thought was not to alleviate the general fund. I think that you've done a really good job of trimming down that to where we're already at a savings level. My thought was to balance the road fund and use those excess funds for those.
Which you very well may need with the lift trucks being the cost of doing a lift truck. And maybe even look into purchasing or something. Something that would give a smaller version as a tool for the employees, a safer way to trim trees. Smaller lift piece.
We can certainly look at
Not
different ways
necessarily a
to-
truck, but they have equipment that allows you to go up.
They do have that
I
sort
don't
of
know what to call it, like a
equipment.
bucket.
Usually the lift truck is more effective. If we're going to rent it, we rent it for a week at a time at least, so that they can dedicate their time to going out and specifically trimming. They're much more productive that way when they have a block of time.
Okay.
I mean, the guys are great, but you give them a block of time, a few chainsaws and a lift truck, and turn them loose, and they can work wonders. So.
Thank you.
What's the, we transferred out FDOT to 6th Avenue median maintenance. Why?
Well, my
That's-
understanding is that there's, FDOT gives the village a specific amount of money that we apply for every year.
It's a maintenance contract from when we installed the landscaping on 6th Avenue. We agreed that we would maintain it, and they've been giving us
Reimburse you.
smaller and smaller and smaller amount for the last, 6 years. Last year, it was $14.50, and I wondered, I was going to ask, it's a renewing contract, so I don't know why I wouldn't renew.
I didn't know if it was something that was open-ended or a one-time thing, because last year, well, for the current year, we budgeted $14.50, we haven't gotten anything in, and then we ended the year with $1,000 that they had contributed, but I couldn't see that it was something ongoing, so for the sake of just being conservative, I wasn't sure if it was coming in, I didn't budget it, but.
We should look for that contract and contact whoever it is that we contacted FDOT to renew it, because it's another $1,000.
Absolutely, we'll definitely do that.
Thank you.
So if it wasn't budgeted, we don't know if we got it in, but we
Well-
still have the expense of taking care of it.
Which is approximately 4 times the amount that the state gives us. taking care of it,
Oh, I'm
watering
sure,
it.
so I'm saying is, so as long as we have additional expenses on the median, why don't we just leave this in the budget? That'll take care of a little of the 8,000. I don't understand why we would
Well,
not.
I didn't find a specific expense related to it in the current budget. Like, I didn't see anything that we would have used that money for.
That would have come under Public Works and Landscaping. That's where we would have used it.
But we may not have separated it out. and
We
it should have been
probably didn't.
separated out.
Yeah.
So
We've
it's
replaced
specifically for
plants.
median maintenance?
On Sixth Avenue.
On Sixth Avenue.
Well, that was
Specific.
what the state gives us, but what I'm saying, this amount, I guess the revenues of 70, the 81,000, the $127,000 includes that. Does or not?
No, it does not.
It does not include that.
No.
So we still have to spend the money for the maintenance, and it's got to come from somewhere.
Yeah.
Why don't we put it in this budget? So now at least we have the money to spend. If they give us more money, it comes into it, and it'll be.
I'll research and
yeah,
see
not
what
a
those
complete wash,
costs
but
are.
A little something,
Right.
because we need to budget for the median maintenance.
Well, median maintenance has historically been under Public Works and Landscaping, and that included, our contribution to the maintenance on Sixth Avenue. And so
You want to
this was-
parcel it out, is that what you're trying to do?
Well, I guess my thought is this way, at least we can go back to them and say, hey, you're giving us X number of dollars. This is what the maintenance is actually costing us. We
Well,
need to
and
rethink this.
For that, we'll need to track that through Public Works.
Right, so maybe we'll
And
start
so-
this year, track it and see what time we're spending on that, so we can then go back to them and say, you're giving us $1,000, it's costing us $6,000.
We can do that.
There's a water meter that is expressly for Sixth Avenue. Maybe we could parcel out that water meter.
That's a good idea.
That's
Yeah,
a possibility.
that's a great idea. Okay. Anybody else on Public Works? I'm sorry, on the roads? I just had a quick question on transfer from the Sanitation Fund. Could you just explain that so that,
Yes, so the sanitation fund, as you know, we assess for it based on our contracted amount. And in the cost, there's not just the cost of that we actually pay the contractor, there's also a portion of salaries, a portion of the managers, the village clerk, I believe the attorney, myself, and also a portion of the road maintenance crew. So, and I think I might have included for the road fund, 10% of the road fund employees are, or 10% of their salary comes from the sanitation budget. And so that amounts to the 23,000, plus their fringe benefits. So that amounts to $23,000 that we actually recoup from sanitation to offset 10% of the salaries. And that's what that is.
okay, great, thank you.
I guess maybe what I don't understand is, if the road fund is money that's from revenue sharing and local tax options, why is not the road fund only that? Why are we transferring something, other revenue stream into this?
No, it's an out, it's not an
No, it's an in.
It's an in.
It's an
We're
in.
transferring 23,000. Yeah, why is it being?
My guess
And
is,
why not
and
go into
I'm
Public
not,
Works?
I don't know a whole lot about what the road employees do, but my guess is that 10% of their time perhaps is spent on sanitation in some capacity.
Measuring oversized piles.
Oh, no, that I can understand. But I'm saying is, so yes, it should go from sanitation to Public Works. It shouldn't go from sanitation to road fund.
Well, but some of the guys are paid through the road fund.
So you have to put it back.
Oh, some of these are being paid through the,
That are paid through the road fund. There are
Yes,
two
we have
individuals
two individuals paid through the
that are
road
paid
fund.
through- Specifically through the road fund, and those two individuals participate in the sanitation fund, and in a portion of the sanitation fund's function. So we recoup
Measuring
those
piles and
costs.
things.
okay, so we theoretically could, whenever we transfer the money in during the year or during the end of the year, instead of transferring 23,000, we actually could transfer less money in. So in fact, we don't wind up with an excess at the end of the year.
It's a timing issue because your sanitation fund is actually adopted in April.
Right.
You've already adopted that. It comes way before the rest of your
Right.
fund. So this number was already calculated at your April meeting. So I used all of it that was allocated in this budget to offset, and then ended up with an $8,000 surplus, basically, which can be allocated either towards additional services or put into this fund's reserve and grow it
Which might be useful
down the road
down
when
the
you
road to get
decide to
equipment and
do.
some things
Well,
like
yeah,
that.
but what I'm saying is, but here, we're limited to certain things, and if we put into a public works budget, it can be used for many more things than just the road.
But,
Like,
but,
I don't know.
but the timing's an issue, so I don't know how you can't, I don't think you can turn back the clock. We've already approved that, unless, I don't know if there's a way to amend it, or...
Well, no, because the
Right.
assessment's already.
You already assessment station,
Yeah.
you can't do that.
You probably already got your proposed tax notices in the
Right.
mail.
Yeah,
So
but
that's-
does it
that's
actually say,
done.
the tax notice say that so much of that budget, the money that your 580 or your 4, whatever it is?
Yeah, it does.
That, in there, it says where it's going to?
Yes, and that's the last
This time
tab
we
in
can't do
your
Okay.
book here. You'll see
So
it.
maybe we need to revisit this then next year when we do that, to change the allocation of the sanitation.
We can definitely look at changing percentages and, what
Yeah.
percentage is actually allocated. But for right now, it was 10% of one employee and 5% of another, actually.
Right.
So I'm not sure how those percentages were derived, but, it's not big numbers and
Right.
seems to, so that's why we incorporated that as a revenue source. Aside with, or along with the local option gas tax and the state sharing, the
Right,
municipal
okay.
portion of the state sharing, so.
Commissioner Ross?
I'm trying to understand why we're so upside down on line 44, rentals and leases, where we adopted 3,000, but we're up to 9,400 year-to-date.
Because the Dodge Ram, no, what is it? I believe one of the cars was being miscoded. I think it was maybe the tractor. I think I was coding it to Public Works, not realizing it belongs in, in road.
But we're overspent, so it looks like maybe the other way around.
Oh,
A
or
second
maybe it
truck
wasn't
was being,
Put
So that's
into-
gonna be a
It might be
ledger-
budgeted in Public Works.
so that'll be some kind of journal entry when you
Yes.
clean up for the year.
Right, yes,
Okay.
yes. And we had a little discussion where we were or I was trying to figure out where every vehicle, where it belongs, and I was a little confused, so Christian helped me out with that, and we actually came up with the vehicle schedule so I could kind of get all my ducks in a row.
Okay.
So,
Anything else? Anybody? Vice Mayor, do you have any comments on that?
Nothing else from me.
Thank you. Okay, CITT Fund.
So the CITT Fund, again, it stands for Citizen Independent Transportation Trust. These are monies given to us by the county, and they're very specific in the uses that we can, or how we can apply this revenue. The proposed amount is given to us by the county. They tell us what we can expect to get. This year, it's $128,000. The first thing that we automatically pay for with that money is the street lighting, all of the village-wide street lighting. And then the rest, the street light, okay, so let me go back a little. The transportation surtax, it's one lump sum, but 80% of it is allowed for transportation uses, and 20% of it is for transit projects. So the street lighting, automatically we apply that, and that falls under the transportation projects, or the transportation use. So the balance, I just broke it out based on a percentage of what we receive. So in this particular budget, we budgeted $24,500 for street lighting. The balance of that 80% of the 128 for the transportation projects is $77,905, and then 20% of that is $25,000. And I didn't have any specific projects. We're looking for your direction as to what those will be, and I know that you had discussed that a few weeks back and came up with your priorities and where that is. And I know that Commissioner Ross had actually asked about the fund balance in that account. Right now, it's somewhere in the range of $384,000, but you have $411,000 in the bank available for transportation and transit projects. So again, and this is another one, this is what the mayor had mentioned. We are being audited by CITT. They want to go back 5 years and see how we've applied those funds. I did explain to them that we haven't really applied them in any particular way, which they're fine with. The funds are allowed to roll over. It's not a matter of us being in any danger of losing that money. But I did tell them we're in the middle of our budget workshops and our budgeting process, and I would report back with some specific projects as they were assigned.
I know we had talked about roads. We didn't really talk about street signs that night because I did want to bring that up. I would like to see, I know Miami Shores has a lot of these really lovely, more decorative type signage that we could use in the village. They're not very costly. I wanted to look at those options. I know we didn't talk about that, but I did want to mention that to everyone, to look at that and consider that as part of the 20% that we can do instead of some of the bus, maybe not instead of, but it may be along with the bus shelter if we decide to do that. I also wanted to we were trying to get some additional funding. The manager and I were working very hard to try and get some county funding to do some of our roads. We were excited because we thought we were going to get some, and sure enough, no. So while we tried very hard, that funding didn't come through. I did see a grant, which I forwarded to the village manager, on federal dollars that are looking for infrastructure. And I also just got an email today reminding me from Dave Caserta that they're getting ready for the legislation session, and I need to rewrite the same one we submitted last year for the road, since our priorities have not changed. And he has asked that I resubmit that and write that as quickly as possible, and I'll be working with the manager to just kind of change it, adapt it to fit the new, any legislative priorities that may come up in the new session. We are tying it to floods because of the base failure. I think you heard one of the, Mr. Raymond talk about base failure and what they call alligator cracks and roads. We do have some other issue with construction and large trucks going over the roads. So before we do all the roads, we're going to have to look at that and make sure whatever we spend the money on, we're not going to allow huge amounts of trucks to then turn around and crack them again. So we'll have to look at how all that together as one piece. But we do have a nice, really large chunk of change here. Let's just round it off to $400,000, which we could get some road work done. I'm looking at my folks over there getting a big yes. And hopefully, we can also look at how to minimize the damage to the roads and current use. So I do think we maybe have to have a workshop separate to that. I don't want to tell you we have a direction, but I do think there's enough need throughout the village that spending the $411,000 would not be very difficult to do based upon the condition of our roads. And I do think that is definitely a priority for the commission, and I think we've all kind of addressed that.
Do we have to address that in the budget, an extra $400,000, or this is just the income from this year?
That's just the income for the upcoming year, and you don't have to address it, but they do require us to report quarterly. So I'd like to be able to say, you know, at September 30th, we have something, you know, we had a workshop and we're looking at traffic calming devices or some type of traffic study or whatever it may be that, you know, I know you had your list of priorities, so I guess I can choose, you know, road resurfacing, any of these things that I'd like to be able to put on a report and say, this is what we're looking into.
So we could break it down, this is what we're planning to do, this is the total amount we're planning on spending,
Yes.
X number of dollars from this year's budget,
Correct.
and so much from the reserves.
Correct. And-
Not reserves, from the
From-
rest of the balance of the
Exactly.
CITT funds.
Correct.
Okay.
And then every quarter, they want to see how you've implemented that. How-
They want a plan. They want a plan. They want to know you want to do X, Y, and Z, it's going to cost this much money, and what you plan to achieve at the end of each time. Basically, a timeline project management piece.
And they are expanding the allowable uses, which is great. I mean, they have meetings, I want to say every other month or so. CITT has meetings, and they talk a lot about circulators. I mean, I'm sure you've all seen in other cities the trolleys, and, you know, they have freebies, the on-demand electric vehicles and things like that. So they're opening it up to that. So maybe something as simple as opening up freebies or little electric cars that come around for senior citizens. I've seen that done in some of the other municipalities, and they take it to the grocery store or things like that. So just something that we should look into and come up with a plan at some point.
And maybe we need to put that on a workshop special for that, I think, since that's a very large amount of money that we could spend if everybody's,
Well, I think we could probably come to agreement pretty quickly that it needs to be spent on roads and repaving.
do we all
And
agree on that?
so-
Well,
Commissioner Ross?
I'd like, if you could, give us a better understanding of the 80-20%, because my understanding of it is that 80% is for transportation and 20% is for group transportation, things that support public transit.
Correct.
So we haven't used much of that money at all. In the early days, we used the 80% for some of our road projects and some of our drainage projects. But the 20, it's kind of very limiting what you could use it on.
Right, and the 20 has been actually the problematic side of it for every municipality, and what they've come up with, you can do bus shelters. I know that they just recently allowed the green striping, I don't know if you're familiar with that, the green striping that's coming up all over the place for bicycles, for cyclists, because I guess it reflects at night, sidewalks,
Crosswalks?
Did they,
even mobility studies, you know, what do you need, you know, as far as what are people...
did they do signage
using?
in that? I thought they also allowed
The
signage.
signage, I think, fell under the
Okay.
transportation
The
side,
80%?
under the
Okay.
80%.
Okay.
But yes, the signage is allowed, and some cities did that, and they just got all new street signs, or even the lit-up crosswalks, I think, fall under the 20%.
The lit up
So,
crosswalks do?
mm-hmm.
Okay.
So, there's a variety of options, and like I said, they do have meetings, so I'll gather some of that
Could you-
information
Yeah.
and pass it out to you, so that you can kind of see where they're at, because they realize that cities are having trouble spending this money, and they're trying to make it a little more feasible for everyone to use it to meet their needs.
Just Vice Mayor, any comments?
I was looking at page 4 of 4 in the CITT, and I think I just had a comment about the breakdown here, the street sign, major road repairs, which I agree with both there. Storm drain, the bus shelters. The only thing I would raise there is that I was thinking of if we can think of something that is a little more, I guess I would use the word global for all residents in the community, if we could see that portion of money go to something that residents have really been looking for. And I apologize because I'm having a hard time hearing. I don't know if that's been mentioned yet.
No, it hasn't.
Okay.
So the question is then, for the bus shelters, which currently is at $21,000 or $22,000, I'd like to see that moved right to road repair, because that's kind of what we all discussed.
But that can't be
That's part of
done.
the 20%.
That's part of the 20%. That
Oh.
cannot be used for road repair, that cannot be used for street signs or storm drains.
Okay, but I'm sorry, go ahead, Vice Mayor.
The only other thing, just spinning off of the road repair, I was wondering, I know that we've done, I guess, patchwork repairs, and I don't know what equipment we have available, but I think CIT funds could be used also for equipment that goes with road repair.
I believe it can.
That was an affirmative. So what are you suggesting?
Suggesting if roads is such a major concern, so I personally would like to see it going in that direction, whether it's equipment or otherwise.
I concur. I just don't think, right now, and correct me if I'm wrong, so I understand this correctly, because I may not be understanding this correctly, where it says bus shelters, $21,000 or $22,000.
That's what was adopted in the current year.
That's the current year budget, right?
Yes.
You have it right now, it's just a list right now of 77 to 25 in terms of what the monies are, but what it's going to be sent as has to be made into a
Has to-
plan.
Exactly.
I just want to be clear.
Yeah, I didn't
Okay.
designate it to
I
any
just wanted to make sure.
particular
Okay.
use.
So the current fund balance is around 330. Of that, 20% is transit related.
Exactly.
So we're talking like
And-
$60,000.
And I think it's more, because we've consistently been paying for streetlights.
Right.
So I think more than 20% of that is transit.
Okay.
And I'll have to go back to the past CAFRs to see how it was split, because they just lump it together. But, and that's what they're going to do when they, or CITT, when they come and do our audit. They're going to say, okay, here's your fund balance, and this portion is,
Right.
they're going to tell us, even if,
Right.
you know, whether we're right or wrong. So I want to say that more than 20% of that 380 or whatever.
Is transit related.
Is transit related.
So just piggybacking on something that Vice Mayor Johnson Sardella was saying, something more community-oriented that would advantage more residents than only the people who take the bus and need a bus shelter. I've seen them, and I have no idea what they cost, but we used to have a sign that somebody won, one of the police officers wanted a challenge, and we would broadcast messages to the resident on
Yep,
those
the message
signs.
board, yep.
Miami Shores has a couple of signs on this same level, maybe a little more sophisticated. What if we were to, at one wall of that bus shelter, incorporate a sign where we can flash messages on 6th Avenue to our residents? It's going to be probably more than $20,000, but it sounds like we have the funds that
Right.
have a very narrow use, a very
Yes.
narrow application. So that may be something that, you know, it stands not only for the people taking the bus, but it also adds a benefit to the general community.
Right, and I know that message boards have been purchased by other municipalities. I would probably just email Mr. Scher, who's the administrator, and say, which one does this fall into? And once I get his blessing, I could definitely
Right.
tell you.
I'm not sure I want it on 6th Avenue. It's kind of like texting and driving. You'll have to forgive me, we've had some really major actions on 6th Avenue. I just don't think people reading signage, I like message boards in certain circumstances, but not on 6th Avenue. I just think we also need to be cautious, although maybe you like the don't even think about speeding on that sign, I don't know, Chief. I understand where you're going for the
It
community
could be
idea.
that kind of message. I mean, you certainly want to have it where you get the most exposure, so more people are getting the message.
I would be cautious putting anything that, on a major roadway. I'm not supportive of that. I think I don't disagree that I like the idea of a message board, but maybe I'd like it in a locality where we're going a lot slower. I also would like to consider maybe dealing with the 6th Avenue in a different way, and I don't know, all right, so.
Yeah, I've got
go ahead.
a thought.
Okay.
I've been speaking to our chief about this, and the question seems to be whether FDOT wants to come up with funds or not about doing possibly two different things. One is a traffic light at the corner of 6th and 119th Street. We have a preponderance of accidents. We had 2 rollovers within 2 hours of each other earlier this year, I believe it was, and where part of the roadway actually burnt. Also possibly crosswalks. I'm not sure if FDOT would be more reasonable if we said we'd pay for part of it. And I would imagine that would definitely come under transit projects, putting up a crosswalk at a traffic light. As it is now, if you're walking through the village, if you want to go from the east side of the village to the west or vice versa, your life is in your hands, because there's no place to do it. We do not have any place to cross 6th Avenue within the village that's safe. And so I have no idea how much it would cost. I don't know if we could get FDOT to, I would love to have them pay for all of it. Maybe to sweeten the pot to say, okay, great, we'll put in 10%, 20%, or some percentage of it to get it done. I think that would it would help most people in the village. It would slow down traffic and it would make it safer.
May I ask the chief to come up here for a minute, because I have a question for him? May I assume if we have a crosswalk, we have some sort of signal that goes with that crosswalk?
Absolutely.
Okay. Could that signal be an official traffic light that would stop traffic?
That's what we're going for.
Just wanted to clarify. Okay.
Yeah, we were actually thinking about a traffic light and/or those lights that flash on and off that when you press the button, so you cross and stops traffic.
I personally would like to see a full traffic light there.
I would too.
Yeah, so would I.
Yeah.
Because
I think we all
that would help a lot with, because I know one of the problems we have right now is, and I've gotten numerous complaints from residents, there's the battle between 6th Avenue and Griffin wanting it, and then the rest of the interior of the park wanting the officers on duty to be giving tickets. And so there's always a struggle, right, with which one do you do during rush hour traffic? And I know for the interior of the park, I get incredible numbers of complaints on those avenues, and if we found a way to kind of nullify 6th Avenue from being able to get up that speed in the first place, then the resources could be used by the police department to be more effective on the interior of the village as well as parts of the other side of the village, and not be focusing on 6th Avenue all the time. I really support that. Vice Mayor, did you have a comment?
I just was going to agree with you on that because I was in one of the interior avenues, I think on the weekend, and I had to slow my vehicle to stop. Someone who was cutting through who wanted to speed. They were basically in my trunk the whole time that I was on the avenue. It was 10th Avenue, I believe. And I know that residents have been complaining, and the police force can't be everywhere at once. So yeah, getting 6th Avenue under control so that they can spread the resources to the interior avenues is a good idea.
Thank you. And the other comment that I had was, what can be used for traffic calming devices, assuming we could get them in, and that's a county, I know that's a whole process, but what part of the funding could be used for that as well?
That would be the
Transportation, okay, thank you. Commissioner Ross, did you have another comment? No? Okay. Anybody?
Yeah, no.
Commissioner Tudor?
We definitely have to figure out how we're going to spend this money, but I think the first step is trying to decide what we actually have available. Since what's in the reserve actually it's not a quick math. 20% of it we can use for this, and it may actually be much more. So I think the first step is finding out what do we actually have available for transportation, transit, and then doing our homework, finding out what the cost is going to be and how we can do some stuff.
So do we in fact have to break this down any more than the 77,000 and 25,000? Is that's enough for the budget?
That's for the funds that are being
Okay, so
dispersed
that's-
this year.
And then we can decide during the year.
And
if
keep in
something-
mind that over the years, it's always been approximately $100,000 that you've been getting. So, even if you were to do something in phases, phase something for this year with the money, especially with the money that you have reserved moving forward, and then, next year, the next phase of it, or, that type of...
Spend half and split it in half and do it in 2 phases or something?
Yeah, 2 or 3 phases,
I guess-
or ongoing maintenance for whatever projects we choose.
I guess I've got one other question about the street lighting is, does FP&L ever tell us how many street lights we actually have?
We receive a bill for it monthly, yeah.
But does it say X number of street lights?
It's individual bills for each streetlight.
Oh,
Yeah,
each
it's-
street light?
And you'll have
No?
such fun signing those
And
checks.
they each have the address and the location.
So it is
and-
because somebody once said, I was out there one day looking at the street lights, trying to figure out where they were. And they said, the last time we saw anybody out here was Ed Burke. And he went out and counted the lights.
And part of this audit, they actually go out and look at every single streetlight and match it up to the electric
Oh,
bill.
they did?
To make sure that,
No, it's
they're
CITT.
going to.
Oh, they are, oh, you mean?
CITT,
Oh,
yeah.
they are going to, oh, great, that's why we don't have to do this.
Yeah, they want to make sure that we're not paying, for example, for these lights under our street lighting
Okay.
allowance, so.
Or the fact
so
that
they
we are in
do
fact
check
paying
it,
for
yeah.
the number of lights they,
Exactly.
says, so we
Yep.
don't have to do that,
Yeah,
okay.
no, they audit it, so.
And I guess,
Thank you, Chief. I want you to have to stand the whole time. Thank you, Chief.
okay, great.
If I could suggest for the manager, since you're new at this, and the commission, if you go on to the county's website, there's a section for CITT, and you could see what other projects and other cities are doing, to give us ideas of what we might want to tap into.
That's great, thank you. Now that we've finished with the preliminary overall, what I'd like to do is take a 5-minute recess, if I may, and then what I'd like to do is come back, and we could go through the budget.
We're still have sanitation.
Whoops. Well, sanitation was adopted back in
That was already
April,
adopted, so I don't know
and
when.
I included it just, for reference.
Okay.
Can I make one comment about sanitation?
Sure.
We did adopt it in April, and we lowered the waste fee for everyone this year, and in fact, it may go up. Last time we had spoken to Kenny, Kenny said we may be 100 tons over our garbage, and it would be an additional $6,000.
Okay.
The amount they charge us is not, that's it. There are additional charges. If we put out more waste than they said we would be normally put out, it could be an additional charge.
But they have, correct me if I'm wrong, last Vice Mayor Sardella said we never had any reports,
We still
so,
have- No, that's right.
Right, we haven't had.
so it's, since we haven't had reports, they can't be charging us unless
But
we,
he,
And their contract stipulates that if there's going to be an increase, it has to be turned into the village by a certain date. They did not turn anything in, and that's why we moved forward.
they did not.
They did
Because when
not.
we spoke to Kenny, he
They
made it
did
seem,
not.
We
sound,
spoke to them at that time, yes.
Yeah,
yeah, and he made it sound like we'd be, okay, so
He
we
had
don't.
nothing.
No.
Okay.
so contractually, they didn't meet their contractual obligations for that.
Okay,
Correct?
That's fine.
Okay. Thank you. All right, so we're going to take just a 5-minute recess. Thank you. Sorry, we're going to get started. Amy? Amy?
You don't have to leave.
That's on tape, just saying. Okay. Okay. We're called back to order, thank you. Now we've gone through kind of a first run. I know this is a workshop, so I think traditionally we've gone through each item, and anybody who has changes or suggestions for amendments to the budget, we do so now. So this will give the time for the commissioners to give some direction to the village manager on any changes they'd like to see in the budget. So I'm just going to do this one section at a time, and since it's so incredibly well put together, I thank you for that. We even have numbers. So any changes to number 1, or any comments on number 1, which is the overall summary? No? Okay, number 2. Yes.
Tudor noticed an error on that. It was an operating transfer out that we eliminated due to redundancy, and we found $32,400 on that.
And we thank you so much for that, Commissioner Tudor. This is why you're here. What are you doing? Listen, I want another 100,000, fine, search. Okay. No, thank you, that's great. That's a wonderful pickup. So on that note, is there anything in number 2? And Commissioner Johnson-Sardella, just tap up if you have anything, okay?
I'm good.
All right, so anything in number 2? The only thing I noticed that I think I spoke to you about is under 335.000, there was a difference between the last one and this one for revenue from 113.4 to 97.20. Did you?
Actually looked into that, and in the first version, I think, let's go back to, we were just talking about the roads. And I mentioned that one of the revenues aside from the local option gas tax was the municipal tax share, and 20%. I had originally budgeted full 100% in the general fund.
Oh, okay.
And then went back and said, oh, they used some of this for the roads, so when you put the two together, the two numbers together, it's the 113.
Okay, perfect.
So.
All right, great. Thank you so much.
Just a catch.
Thank you. Anything else on this section? Check. I had a question more than under on 13 of 20. I just want to make a comment regarding facility rentals to look forward when you start talking about changes, and I know we've talked about having a community forum on the rec center once Easton gets his feet wet, and he hasn't just been here for a couple weeks. But to talk about the use of facility rentals and how that will amend or change. And I'm not sure it'll impact the budget as much, but it may impact the budget if we remove programs or things that we have in place. So I just want to make a notation of that, as you may not have that money, or you may, depending. Okay?
And that is strictly an estimate on that revenue. We are planning to continue to increase programming. We've added the Zumba class, the Pilates class, and so, hopefully we will be able to exceed that.
That's where all the residents went tonight and weren't here this evening. I'm just saying.
Okay, working on it. My free time.
Okay. That's all I had for that section, I believe. Anybody else for 2? All right, going on 3. That's the commissioner section. I have no changes to that section. Anybody? Commissioner Ross.
I have a suggestion. Having just come back from the Florida League Annual Conference in Orlando, and enjoying almost 4 full days of instruction, because aside from the annual conference schedule, they tack on in the beginning, the day before, other things that are not part of the tuition. The next one is going to take place in Hollywood, so there's no overnight expense. You drive up and drive back. And the cost of it is $525. It includes many meals and networking opportunities, but most of it, the meat of it, is really, really good information. And you can pick from which curriculum, from which seminars, sessions you want to attend, so it's not topic restrictive. I would strongly suggest, strongly urge our commission to go, and I wish that we would set aside at least half of that tuition for each commissioner to attend. It's $525 each, which is a pretty big ticket. In the past, when I've gone, the city has reimbursed me 1/2 of the tuition. So,
For that, right now, we have $3,000 in the budget, correct?
Right.
And that is taking place next year. What time frame is that? Just about
It's
this
in
time?
August.
August again.
August.
Okay.
So it would be in this budget year. I haven't gone to many of the local league meetings, sort of saving up my budget dollars for that annual, but you hate missing out on the local league, because those are the cities nearby that are going to lend their hand and we can do collaborations with, so that's important also.
That's why I attend those, yeah. So it's another $2,600, correct? Thoughts? I'm not sure we all have to go, but I do think having representation and bringing that back minimally, and I know you attended as well in your other capacity.
Could that be considered under education and training and use part of that? Or should we transfer during the course of the year more funds into education and training if we need it?
Here's a thought. Since we know it's going to be here next year, this isn't going to be every year, we could transfer a couple thousand more in it. I don't have an objection to that. Not everybody has to go, but maybe we can designate people to go, a couple of us to go. It's up to everybody here what the interests are and the value. I always say to what end, for what purpose. So besides us educating ourselves and being better politicians or better serving our community, I do like to make sure that we're spreading kind of the wealth around. I know there was a mayor's conference and we couldn't go. It was $1,900. Had it been a couple $100, I would have gone, but it was $1,900. And almost everybody except the smaller cities, Al Portel couldn't go, Miami Shores didn't go, we didn't go. So because it was beyond our budget, I'm not sure if that's the reasons why the other folks didn't go. But I do agree with Commissioner Ross that some of these things can be very fruitful, especially when you're looking at trying to obtain additional revenue sources. So I look at it from that perspective. So I support what you're saying. I'm not sure, based upon what our expenditures are currently, and then what we're here, how much more we need to add to that to really cover most of that. And maybe you could come up with a figure, and then we could, if the commission is amendable, to increase it a bit.
Rox, did you say in the past has it been half or?
In the past, the village has reimbursed me for 1/2 the tuition, but my hotel bill alone
Right,
was
yeah. So the tuition is $525?
I'm sorry?
The tuition was $525?
$525 is the tuition. The $3,000 that's earmarked is from the last budget was $600 per commissioner
For the Miami-Dade
for
League.
Miami-Dade League or for their annual dinner or, you know, or things of that nature.
So why don't we add another $1,500 in there, and then we give each of us $300 towards that?
May I suggest you add, I would add a bit more than that, only because there's so many other things going on that we're
Let's
not
add
participating
another
in.
$2,500 in,
Okay.
and if we don't go...
If we don't spend it, we don't use it, and I think if we're very cautious about it.
Okay.
Okay. So do you want to make it 2,500, so it would make it 5,500?
Yeah.
Okay. Vice Mayor, do you concur with that? Well, let me see, do you give direction to that effect?
Yes, I'm fine.
Commissioner Tudor?
Well, I am one of these difficult individuals where if we're going to be raising any type of expenditures on the commission side, I'd like to actually find some offsetting costs elsewhere.
Okay.
Because what I don't want to do is say, well, we got to do all these cuts in other departments, but, you know, we're going to expect it on the commission side. So whether there's savings somewhere in the limited commission budget or
We could-
elsewhere, I'd like to see a little bit of an offset there. That's just my personal opinion.
We could each give $500 up on our salary, and that way it gets covered.
Fine with that.
I'm not,
Okay.
just because of the expenditures and the stuff that's
Right.
going on. I'm not fine with that, because I do so much.
Well, we have the travel and per diem, which is $2,500.
We just up that because of the issue of going places.
There's very few line items, so there's not much skin to shave off here.
Not off of
Okay.
here, not off this budget, there isn't. Why don't, do you want to designate, instead of doing that, do you want to just designate somebody to go? And then just deal with that later, just have 2 people designated to go?
I mean, my experience has always been, because the agency I'm at right now, we're on a continuing resolution for years. So our budget's been flat, which is costs going up, the budget's been lower. So what we've done when it's come to training is, you know, we've had to make tough decisions, and we may send one person with the understanding that person's going to
Can come back and bring it.
do an educational seminar with the rest of the staff.
Can I make a recommendation here? I think it's really important that the commissioners, as many as possible, attend. We've got 4 new commissioners, and I think it benefits the village for all of you guys to attend. It certainly does for Commissioner Ross, who, you know, already has the contacts in place and needs to keep them current. And from that perspective, I mean, we're looking at, we have excess revenues this year of $212,000 that we'll be putting into reserves. I don't think $2,500 additional for the commissioners for educational purposes is going to hurt us this year. I'm not saying we should do it every year, but I think this year we've got the money for it. We've got new commissioners, and we should utilize it.
I'm fine with that.
I'm fine with
As if
that.
this is a one-time
Yeah.
opportunity, it's local, with no travel time.
Yeah, I would be all right with it.
Okay. So is there a direction to enter the 2,500 increase?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Vice Mayor?
Yes.
Yes? Commissioner Tudor?
No, but it's 4-1, so.
Well, we're just giving direction. There's no vote here. It's a workshop.
Right.
Okay. All right. Anything else in this particular budget?
Administration.
So we're going to go to number 4, for administration. Commissioner Ross?
Just misplaced my notes on administration.
If you're looking, I'll just mention there was only one thing I saw specifically. And I think I spoke to the village manager on this. It just has to do with the education funding, just making sure that moving forward for the hearings, you have some ideas of what you'd like to see happen generically, not necessarily specifically, just to get an idea of, because we have increased our education budget for
Right.
the staff, so I'd like to see that utilized in a way that's going to have a positive impact for the community. And then having some plan to do that, to make sure whatever trainings are there, they're for the community. The other thought I had, I have kind of mixed feelings about, but I'm going to mention, we have historically been training people and then they leave. And that's a cost to the village that doesn't come back to us. So I don't know the feasibility, the viability, or if it's realistic to do that. I haven't had a chance to speak to the attorney over the issue, but I'd like to find a way that if we train somebody, they come and then they leave a year later, that they're not taking that with them at a cost to the residents.
There is
So-
a way. And what you do is before they attend whatever training there is, you write up a contract that they promise to stay with the village for a year,
Where
6
there's
months.
something
Right,
so
and then
that there's a
right.
cost.
And
So
that's,
Because we have historically had people train and then leave right away. And
And
I
that's-
just want to make sure that what we're doing is making sure it isn't coming always out of the residents' pockets. And
Right.
I don't want to be unreasonable about it, I'm not talking about a $200 training if, I don't know, we're doing a roads thing and the public works guys are going. But if it's a substantial cost to the village, it's going to further credential that individual. I just want to make sure that we're not holding the bag if they leave 6 months later.
most companies do that with certifications and all sorts of
I know
things.
companies do it. What I don't know, and this is where I'm just bringing this up to look into, is I don't know if municipalities do that. And I don't want to do something that's different in that sense, but at the same, I don't want to set precedent, but at the same time, I just want to make sure we're being reasonable, especially if it's very costly. I'm not talking about something that's, $100 training or something. I'm talking about anything that's substantive,
What's substantial as far as
$1,000 or more.
$1,000 or more? I'm not sure that we have any training for current employees that would fall into that category. I might have to look at it and see.
Okay, I'm trying to find something
Yeah.
so that we're not just outlying, and I'm not trying to be unreasonable about this. I want the employees to get better. Everybody
Sure.
wants them to do that, but at the same time, I don't want to be the training gown, because we do have a tendency to train and leave. So I just want to make sure we're being reasonable about that. That's all.
I can't think of a situation where we had that occur. I know that there are times that we have hired people who didn't have the proper certifications because we wanted to pay them less money, and then we had to pay for them to get certified. But I can't think of an instance where someone had training and left within 6 months or any time shorter than that.
Well, I guess certification would be the same thing. If somebody has to be certified, it costs us $200, $300. They're not going to leave right after the end of the training.
But-
We're
but
not
what
going
you're-
to indent them for a year or two, but maybe 6 months.
But we hired that person at a lower rate because of that.
Yeah,
So,
but
I
then we
mean, it's
paid
like you can't
for
have it
two-
both ways.
I just want us to consider it. I'd like us to look at it. If it's not something that it's going to change the budget line item,
No.
but it's something I just want us to consider as a policy moving forward, so that we're not, it's kind of like the carrot and the stick. You want to be able to help out people, you want to help them grow. We know they're not going to stay forever. That's not the intent here. At the same time, I don't want to have somebody say, okay, fine, I'll take it, I'll do that, and then immediately I'll leave. So I just want to make sure that we're covering ourselves a little bit, that's all. And this comes back to not only just the education piece, but also if you look at the vacation and how we fronted all the vacation pay. And that did cost us a lot of money. There was a tremendous amount of cost, and I know you're working to change that policy anyway. So that will take care of a lot of that, I think. I think I'm coming from both positions, and probably more from the latter than the former, in that most of our situations are we give people a bunch of vacation pay up front, and then they walk with it, and they haven't even spent the time. And I think that's where I'm coming from, in addition to the education. I just want to make sure there's a balancing act that happens, that's all.
Yeah, the only thing on the budget, 12 of 25, Christian and I, my nephew, we went over some of these things as far as what we're being charged for the phone system and all the other things with Comcast and whatever. And I think we found some savings in there. Comcast actually has to come out and let us know. In here, for example, we're being charged for 2 phone lines with international and national calling. and we're being charged for broadcast TV on the monitor. I have no idea. And five ISP addresses. And I don't know, well, yeah, so we were looking at that. I think we'll save some money. We don't
We
know how
will,
much exactly
yeah,
yet,
and-
but we're going to go over it. It's,
Oh, that's great. That's super. And I noticed also that I spoke to the finance manager on the fact that our IT went down significantly. That's because there was once again another correction that had to be made from some of the data entries. So that's back down as well, and I thank you for finding that as well. Commissioner Ross?
Under administration, we have line item 13, which is part-time salaries for $21,060.
I'm sorry, which page are we on?
Administration? I'm just looking at the summary page.
It's page 425.
425? Thank you.
Okay, so if you're paying someone $21,060 at a rate of $12 an hour, that means that they're working almost 34 hours a week. And if you go on the web at irs.gov, there's a definition of full-time employee, which is an employee employed on average at least 30 hours of service per week. So either we split it into two part-time positions. I don't know, there may be a gain there by having different skill sets, but we can't have someone work as a part-timer without having benefits and work 34 hours a week.
We will definitely look into that, absolutely.
My question to you is, the reason why people take part-time work isn't because they're picking up extra money? Some? And some have
Some.
other reasons to do that, correct?
Yes.
So you'll see if there's a problem with a legal issue on that. But I also know that if not, the alternative is seasonal work. And that leaves less quality individuals being at the park or in the office, depending on where this particular position is.
It's under the administration's budget.
Yes.
Yeah, this is the part-time admin person.
Correct.
Currently, we have him located at the rec center because we needed the staffing. Now that East is in place, we'll be looking at that and seeing where we can trim.
So when you key in that salary, you should consider that there was in the budget set aside money for a seasonal worker
There was
at
$3,000.
the recreation
Yes.
center.
But that's exceeded.
I'm sorry?
I think this was to plug a serious shortfall in staff
It was at the time.
in the summertime, which was seasonal. However, it became a situation where they needed employees at the park, or we were going to have to deal with safety issues and much more draconian measures at the park. So I think you did this as a safety measure. Is that correct?
That was done as the safety measure, yes. But, I mean, Commissioner Ross is right. We do need to make sure
Make sure,
that we've
absolutely.
expended that seasonal and utilize that, so we can do that.
Okay. Thank you.
The other thing I have, like to consider in administration is when we last met and discussed the salaries, and there was a question of the village clerk and the percentage of FRS contribution. That is in this department, right? Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so when we walked away from here, my understanding was someone was going to come back to us with the definition of what the FRS was, not make the adjustment, but bring the definition and we would discuss it.
I did look into it. FRS has an actual guide, they have guidelines for classifying a position. And they tell you basically what those are. First of all, there's a salary range that you have to fit into. There's a minimum that you have to fall into, which our clerk falls into that easily. Then they give you factors to consider. Some of them are the nature of the work performed, the level of responsibility, the scope of duties, whether there's supervision received or exercised? So do you supervise other people, and that's how you determine it? Then they have a whole worksheet that you would fill out in order to determine it and come up with the ranking as to that, whether that person is, what class they fall into if there's any doubt. So there are guidelines, and, we would follow your direction. Do we fill this out? Do we determine it? It's up to you.
I read all the codes, the Florida Administrative Code, I looked at the statutes that were involved, and no matter how many times I read it, it didn't make sense to me. I did reach out to the attorney and did ask some questions, which he will be happy to do in our next meeting. It's a square peg in a round hole. You can maybe find a possible link to do it if you really had to or wanted to. That's a possibility. I'm not going to comment on that because that's really the attorney's job to do that. But this, right now, as we sit, I think there are two issues here. One is, does the responsibility and the level of what they're doing warrant the salary raise versus a senior management risk management? And I think there are two different issues here. I think the issue is salary and not one of senior management. I think the class issue, to me, is, I looked at several other village clerks, and unless you're in an enormous city with a lot of different people, and it's very few of them that are doing this, very few that I could even find. I couldn't find but I think one or two, and they were very big cities. And they had huge number of staff under them. They weren't a little tiny city with 3,000 people. For me, this is not about the person, but the position. So I want to be very clear about that. It's not about the person, but the position. I think in our city, we ask a lot of our employees. We ask them to do a tremendous amount. Risk management, HR. There's a tremendous amount of work that goes to being the village clerk here. It's not just the clerk because you're wearing many hats. At the same time, it's a $50,000 salary, which may not be enough if we could pay somebody what we wanted to pay them. But I think in this year, at this time, with the $300,000 coming, I cannot in good faith to the taxpayer, which we're also responsible to, see a way to do that. I don't know. I recall, if I am correct, and I hope I'm being correct in my numbers, I believe it was 42 or 43,000 was originally budgeted for this position. And I'm going to tell you, I looked at every single resume. The most qualified candidate is sitting up on that dais right now. It is very difficult to sit there and have to do these types of things, but I must say that I just can't at this time support this with a $300,000 cut coming. I think we need to look at this. However, one of the things I would like to see for all the employees this year is I would like to have them the opportunity, if they're going to be a year by the time the budget is done, be part of that potential 3% bonus, which I think is reasonable. It's rewarding the employees for working very hard, and would be a more reasonable thing to do. I don't think the intent for me was to cut out anybody who wasn't under a year. The intent for me was to make sure they don't get that money until the year at the point at which they're the anniversary. I would like to see that amended in such a way, as opposed to this.
Beatrice, what have we paid before, previous village clerks?
Well, it's, as far as FRS, that's a complicated answer, only because you had a clerk who was serving in the capacity of manager, and so she was getting the senior management rate. Although I couldn't quite determine, because there seemed to be a crossover, so I couldn't determine when that began. It's, I guess maybe she served as interim and then you hired a manager and then she served as interim again. So it was very difficult
Do we have
to
anything
figure it
from
out.
the year before, like 2014?
Well, we are being audited by FRS, so I will have that answer for you.
Okay, yeah. This way at least we know what.
Audit number 5? Audit number 5? Yes. Yes.
Oh, okay. So don't-
Vice Mayor, did you have a, I heard a noise, so I wasn't sure if you were trying to chime in.
No, I was fine with everything on 4. Nothing else for me.
Thank you. So I guess we have a direction.
So,
As
I'm
the-
sorry. Are we done closed with this line item?
No, what I'm saying is, I'm not closed, if you allow me to finish. what I thought we could do is at least readdress the issue of, there were 2 positions that were left out in this current budget versus the previous, which was, we talked about a 3% bonus. It's not necessarily automatic, it's performance-based, at the year anniversary point. I believe, if I'm correct on the hire dates for the other 2 individuals that were left out, it would put them in this annual budget. That would be the code enforcement officer and the village clerk, correct?
Correct.
I am suggesting that we do that as part of this. The same for all employees in the administration division, because we can't discuss public works, we can't discuss police, so we can
Does
discuss.
that include the manager?
That's an interesting concept. I know he gave it up last time, but I don't see any reason, I had no problem with that.
Okay, then I would like, presuming I get that raise, whatever it is, I'd like that to go to our employees. So we can
spread that over.
redistribute it through our staff, absolutely.
That is incredibly generous and kind of you.
They've earned it.
I do want to suggest one thing that we have to be careful of, because we're saying yes to that. I think we have to look at the contract, because we're under a contract with you in the same that we negotiate, so he's offering to take whatever is in his contract, is that correct? To give that and redistribute it back to the employees, and put that as part of the pool.
Or any raise over what I currently make
Okay.
for the sheriffs.
Okay.
I don't think this is an appropriate place to renegotiate the manager's contract. When the time comes to make that decision, then, you know, he'll have discretion and he could advise us what he's doing, but I don't think that this is a place to do that.
I don't think I think that was an offer by the manager.
I'm sorry if I was out of line there, Commissioner Ross. I didn't mean to do that. I just meant to, offer that up.
No,
So,
I appreciate that you made the offer, but it's not for us to concede it or agree or have consensus about it. I don't think we should be doing that.
I think right now, all I would be in agreement to do is, for the ones that you backed out a 3% lump sum merit, to include that in so that when the 1-year anniversary comes up, then if they meet the qualifications and meet whatever criteria, then those monies are already.
Right, and it would
for
be
that.
up to not to exceed 3%, and, I mean, it could be pooled, and then it could be awarded on a obviously on a performance basis, so I can do that by department.
I think you should leave it the way you had it and just allow that, and then allow them to do up to the 3%, so it's performance-based, so that we don't, if not, there could be equity issues that I would be uncomfortable with. So that doesn't mean they're guaranteed the 3%, it means they can get up to 3% depending on their performance, and that's up to the manager, which is totally in his purview. So do we have a direction to do that? Yes? Vice Mayor?
Yes, I'm fine.
Commissioner Ross?
I wasn't clear on what you were saying, but you have consent, you have a majority, so.
Okay, we'll move on. Okay. Anything else in this section?
Yes, going back to the issue of the clerk and the FRS contribution. I read the Florida statutes myself, I read the FRS websites myself, and there is area for,
Commissioner Ross, we just all said that, and so you're going back to the same thing.
excuse me, you're interrupting me, you didn't allow me to interrupt you. I'd like to get my comments on the record.
But what you're doing is you're going back to renegotiate or to rediscuss something that was already just discussed and moved
Okay.
on.
We had a workshop 2 weeks ago. We sat here and we talked about all of these things. One of the things we talked about was...
I'm going to say it again.
Yeah,
We
one of
already
the things-
reissued this, and this has been
one
closed.
of the
We've just
things
done
we
it. We're not
talked
going to go
about-
back and do it again.
One of the things we
It's
talked
already what
about
time?
was the clerk's FRS contribution. It was set a certain way in that budget, and when we came back here, it was set a different way. Well, the commission didn't direct for that to happen. The commission asked for someone to come back with the detailed explanation so that we could have that discussion and make that determination. Something happened in 2 weeks that the rest of the commission, me included, was not a party of. So I'd like to have an
Yeah,
understanding.
You're trying to ask why that happened? And that's a
No,
yes, you
I want to
are.
have the discussion that we were supposed to have.
Okay.
As when we left the workshop after the first budget workshop.
Yeah, my understanding was after the last budget workshop, where going to get some guidance from the village manager and the finance director about what's the criteria for the senior level that would, and so that we could actually make a determination, is it clear guidance that, you know, given what FRS says, that it's a, you know, we have to go that route, or, you know, we don't. And so I don't know if we, you know, I don't know if we have, for me, clear enough on that yet. I know I looked at the guidelines, and it was very kind of open. It left a lot to the discretion of the village. And my understanding also as well is that when you do this worksheet, but there's also a public notice that has to go out.
There is, yes.
Yeah. And so, yeah, there's a whole process with that, which, you know, I was expecting that we kind of get a little bit more into, just to have more of an understanding about.
Okay.
So when I read it in Florida statutes, there is a definition that where the employee has responsibility to affect or recommend personnel, budget, expenditure, or policy decisions in his or her area of responsibility.
Just to be clear for the public, this is Florida Statute 121.055. I just want to make sure the public knows where you're reading from, and it's section C2.
Okay, I'm
Commissioner
glad you
Ross.
read it as well. Obviously, you've done your research. And so I think that the person who serves as our clerk, the person who serves in the position of clerk here in the village, they do meet those responsibilities to affect or recommend personnel to budget for expenditures and policy decisions within the area of the clerk's responsibilities, as well as the added duties that we require of the clerk in the areas of HR, in the areas of procurement. I think that there's a tremendous amount of responsibility that's conferred on her and on the person who serves as the clerk. And by the way, let me go back for a moment, because I heard someone make a comment that I'm arguing against the village and for the employees. No, all of these arguments, all of these points that I make about the employees and wages and benefits, it's because I want to have stability in the village. I don't want to have an employee come in and be trained and even expend village funds to get them certified or further their education, and then they leave because they're not being properly compensated. It's important to me to have a stable environment for our employees, and that extends itself to the village. So when we left the last budget workshop, the budget was at a certain level in the administrative department, and we were to get a better explanation. And thank you for a partial explanation, but I think that we need to dig deeper into this.
Here's
time.
Okay, when you're finished.
Excuse me.
When you're finished, go ahead.
There is time to make this final determination at the hearings, at the budget hearings. We're still a ways from that. What troubled me was that the budget came back to us with a change without the explanation that we were requesting. And so it was a foregone conclusion, and we didn't have the opportunity to discuss it. That I found most troubling. And I understand that still after discussion, because there are certain weights to cut budget, the commission may decide, majority may decide to reduce the FRS that was first offered. But we have to have the discussion, and we have to have it here. We can't have things change in the background, and then we come back and it's all been pre-decided.
Real quick, just for clarification, this second draft, my understanding is the 22.71 is this amount of 29,977 is both for the village manager and village clerk.
Correct.
We didn't reduce it down to.
No, we did reduce it down. And so,
This is the village manager, this is the village clerk.
No, this regular.
That's the clerk and the administrative assistant as well. That's in that position.
So
And
there are two. Okay. I was under the impression that Beatrice had said we were undergoing another audit from FRS, and we can ask them what their opinion is?
Well, the decision is up to it's up to management and the council.
And statute and Florida
What
administrative.
they would tell us is the history of that position in the past.
Okay, so they can tell us
They could
what we...
historically tell us, what was the rate that was being paid to this particular employee
Right.
or contributed.
So if we were to change it, it would be, if we would decrease it, it would be giving them less salary than the previous ones were given. If we were increasing it, we're giving them an increase.
Just real quick, Vice Mayor, and then Commissioner Tudor. Vice Mayor?
Yeah, I just want to jump in and comment about the FRS, which, if this is something that's statutorily regulated, whether it's the Florida Administrative Code or the Florida statute, I guess, let me ask our village manager, did he get input from our attorney? Because we may want to do something, but if we can't do it under the statute or under the regulations, then we can't do it. With all the discussion in the world, we're not going to be able to do it. So can we get that response from our attorney one way or the other?
And have him bring it back to us.
We did speak with the attorney, and he actually sent us the FRS instructions, and that just lists the notice requirements and so forth. So if we wanted to do this for the clerk tomorrow, we couldn't because of the notice requirements. However, we could, going forward, we can, go through the list of requirements and so forth.
But I did talk to the attorney, and there's still some questions on the statute regarding the application of that statute in sections there.
Yes.
So I don't think we have clarity yet completely. And I do think we do need to get that one way or the other, see if it's even possible, and then we can discuss whether or not. But I'm not willing to do a 3% raise and a $7,000 into the reserves. When I suggested the 3%, that was in lieu of the other, not for both. I would not be in support of both. And I just want to make a comment as to why I think this is a square peg in a round hole, which is what I'm saying. If you go through the statute, and I recommend everybody read it, while some village managers in very large cities are doing this, we are not. We are 3,000 people. And once again, this is not about the number of hats or what that position is entailing, because maybe the problem isn't just with whether or not this is a senior management position. Maybe the problem is with we have too many tasks on one individual, and it needs to be changed. And I've discussed that with you briefly. And being risk manager, HR, and clerk, it's a lot of hats. It is.
It is a lot of hats.
And sorry? And webmaster, thank you. This is a lot of hats for anybody. I know the hours that the former village clerk spent. It's a lot on people and their personal lives. It really does intrude a lot. I think that's the bigger question for me, rather than whether it's a senior management position. When you read things like this, they talk about presidents of community colleges, participating municipalities, directors, superintendents. It's talking about very senior level positions. I'm not saying there aren't a couple clerks that may be in this, but the vast majority are not sitting in a senior management pool for risk management for FRS. And that's what I don't agree with. That's why I'm telling you I don't agree with that particular piece. Also, there's things like 0.5%. We have how many employees? That's really one employee, not two. So there are a lot of things in here that are not clear. I agree with Vice Mayor Sardella that maybe we need to get clarity from the attorney just to see if it's possible in the first place, because she's right. We're arguing over something that may not be possible anyway, or may not be really the proper use of that. And since you're going to be meeting with FRS anyway, that may be a conversation to bring up and to discuss with them. But for this budget now that we're moving forward on, I cannot support this at this juncture.
Well, like I said, I think we need to sit down. This is definitely something to have a discussion on. But right now, with the way the budget is currently proposed, it's factoring in the 22.71% for both village manager and village clerk. So we're going to...
No, it's
No.
not. It's
No, it's
currently
not.
it's
It was
not doing
originally
that.
proposed.
It was originally proposed that way.
Okay,
And then-
so at 29,977.
Yes, sort of just gleaning from the what I was hearing from the commissioners, I sort of nudged it back for this particular thing. If you guys would like to change it back to that, I'd be glad to do that.
I would not be supporting it.
The budget that was hand-delivered to us on Saturday
Mhm.
shows 29,977. Sometime between Saturday and when this was posted on the website, it was changed.
Yes.
But we didn't have a discussion about it.
Okay.
This is what's troubling to me.
And that's my fault. I actually emailed Beatrice Saturday and asked her to change that. And so my apologies, and we can put it back, and I'll follow whatever the commission would like me to follow.
I'm
on
very, the logic doesn't, I'm sorry, but I can't follow the logic. If you could help me understand it. Because we were here 2 weeks ago, and at least 3 of the commissioners, maybe 4 of the commissioners, wanted to have a better understanding of what the FRS requirements were. We wanted to have the explanation brought back to us so that we could have a discussion.
that. Right.
But that didn't happen. A change occurred before that was able to happen.
And so,
I'm
no-
trying to understand the logic of it.
Sure, and that was me just sort of judging from those that I'd spoken with, those commissioners that I'd spoken with, where it was going to go. And I said, I contacted Beatrice on Saturday and said, you probably need to change that. So that's on me. And we can, certainly change it back for the budget hearing, whatever the commission would like, we can do.
So let's give direction. I think that would be the appropriate thing to do at this point.
I
and
would
see
like
where
to
the
see it
consensus-
the way that it was first presented to the public before it was changed away from the public eye.
Okay.
I think that's
I think
inappropriate,
that is
but,
transparency.
okay. I'm not going to be, let's just do it down the road. Consensus, or not, excuse me, we can't vote, so direction. Vice Mayor? Vice Mayor? Are you in support or not support? The question, are you in support?
Repeat what you're going to say. Go ahead.
Are you in support or not support to leave it as it currently is written with the the same risk management that that the position is still currently being budgeted or being used, or to move it forward to the
I'm
senior
sorry,
management?
that explanation is not really, that's not a...
Excuse me, now you're interrupting me. I'm going to respectfully request that you give me the same courtesy. Thank you.
You're persuading her on how to vote.
I'm not persuading anything. No, we're not voting. It's what direction you're giving commission.
Persuading her on what the answer is going to be.
No, I said, which does she want? To leave it at 7.82 or 22.2 for the village
It's not leave it
clerk?
at, because it originally was presented to the
I'm
public
trying to leave it
right away.
the way it is and get the confirmation from our attorney, because I'm not comfortable to change something that would go against statute.
Okay?
Yeah, if we've always paid 7, I can't see any reason for changing it. I
Commissioner-
would like to leave it the way it is unless we find out, we have other information saying, no, we've always paid 22. But if we haven't, then we should stick with the way it always has been in the past.
Commissioner Tudor.
This is a budget proposal that's being presented to us by the village manager. This is not set in stone. This is an item that we're going to have to discuss. I mean, I don't have the updated sheet, so what my sheet shows is the 29,977. That would be the 27% or 22% proposed employees. I don't have a problem either way, having it at 7.92 with the corrected amount, or leaving it with both, how you originally presented it, so that we can then discuss it. Once we have clearer information. I mean, I think we're kind of getting spun up on we're not setting this in stone right now. This is just a workshop. We're just having a discussion. If you want to present this budget to me, this is how I operate. You want to present this budget to me with you and the village manager, or you and the village clerk at this higher contribution rate. That's fine. Now we're going to get the information, we're going to have the discussion, and then I can make a determination whether or not, yes, statutorily, we have to go this route, or no, we're going to go back to the 7.92 what we were doing. So I think we're getting really spun up on this when this is just a workshop and we still don't have all the information. I want to get the other information so that we can make a real determination. I don't want to make sure that we're doing something that, we may have been doing wrong all along, or try to do something that we can't do. The 22.71 may be a nice thought, but statutorily, we may not be able to do it at all. Let's get the information. Let's have that discussion at another time when once we have the information, the guidance from, all of us have had the guidance from the village attorney, then we can have that.
I think you're putting a number in on a first reading. That's what it's going to be, a number in a first reading. The discussion will come up again, clearly. Either way, it's still going to come up. So you took direction you heard from everybody, and I'll let you come up with how you choose to do that at this point. That's my,
So this is a budget, and it doesn't mean that you have to expend it. You're putting it aside, you're earmarking it. I would earmark the 29,977.
you got all 5 people telling you, we're not voting here, we can't vote, it's a workshop, so you have all 5
Okay.
people's input.
All right,
Just-
so-
I'm, just to let you know, I like to err on the side of caution, so if this is still an item that's going to be up for debate, and it seems like it is going to be up for debate, I would rather go ahead and earmark the 29,000,
Okay.
just to be cautionary, so that when we make a determination, and if the determination is no, it goes to the 7.92,
But
yeah,
it-
7.92, then that's additional, that'll just go back into the reserves. So
Once again, I'm not in
Just
support of that.
we're-
I'm not in
we're just
support of
getting
that.
all- I think we just need to move forward. to the
Okay.
next
Let's
item.
go next.
You can make your decision.
Okay, so
You've heard from all of us. At this point, you'll have to make your decision. Okay. The next one is number 5, debt service. Anything on that? I know we talked about you're getting closer on the banking side. Will we change this outputter before the?
Yes, we met with a third bank today. You had requested at least three proposals. We met with the third bank today, and I told them our deadline for the budget. I told them how much we'd like to make changes to the budget in this aspect. So they will we'll have all 3 proposals for your review by the beginning of September, prior to your first hearing.
Okay,
so we actually will be able to look at that at our commission meeting in September.
okay, and then that will impact, okay. Any other questions on that section?
No.
Police? Any sections on the police? Oh, I saw that you corrected, for everybody in the audience, page 13 of 20, all the corrections were made on the vehicles, which, do you want to just review overall expenditures, since that's our largest part of our budget? Do you just want to give a quick review of how the changes were, for the sake of the audience who might be watching?
On the rentals and leases?
But how the overall impact that changed and what the changes were?
Oh, okay.
Since that is our largest budget.
Okay, yes. A couple of things that we changed in the police budget. We removed the comp time that had originally been presented, and we increased the court time. We decreased the phone allowance, and the chief said he didn't need his phone. We removed that. We updated the vehicle list and increased that by $33,000, almost $34,000. As a result of that, of course, we increased the auto insurance to reflect that. There was a small change to printing and binding, and we also added $2,500 for a speed trailer. Overall, we decreased the budget by $17,730.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or discussion items in the police department?
Question on the radios. I'm not sure if we reviewed this, but we have a couple of new we just ordered a couple of new cars, and they're going to need radios.
Chief?
I believe, Chief?
Are we budgeting enough at $5,000?
As far as the radios for the new cars, I was hoping that one would have the sheet available to me for tonight, but that is some of the products that we had found in the closet. So we were able to find 2 or 3 trunk-mounted radios at a cost of about $5,000 each that were just sitting there. So that has been installed in the new police cars.
Okay.
So we are actually doing all right in that sense.
And the motorcycle?
The motorcycle is going to be a handheld radio as opposed to a fully mounted one, which is going to be more expensive because it has to be weather resistant.
So the $5,000 will cover you?
It should.
Okay.
And if I might add to that, I had spoken to the chief and to the manager, and we do have money in our forfeiture account, and I suggested to them that instead of loading it in the police budget, that we spend those funds for the equipment that you might additionally need.
What is the balance of the forfeiture fund?
I think there's about a little over 8,000, about $8,500 in there.
Thank you.
The only question I had for the chief is the dues and membership. Just, I know there's a lots of things, I just want to make sure that's appropriate. I just don't know, so.
Yes, that's an appropriate amount.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Okay, thank you, chief. Building department?
I don't believe there were any changes to that.
I had a question on the FRS contribution. It's 0.
The employee in that position, she's retired.
I guess I've got a question about building. We discussed about possibly having companies come in and do maybe a little bit more of our workforce as far as the building department goes. Do we have money to pay for that if somebody, let's say we do outsource or do something else? What do we do?
We do. We have, the way that works, you're talking about a building official and inspectors.
Building inspectors and whatever else we'll possibly need, yeah.
They typically we pay them roughly a percentage of the permits. And so as many permits as come in, they get X percentage of that. I believe it's currently at about 60% of it, or 65% of it. So that, the more permits come in, we've always got the money to pay them for inspections, that sort of thing.
Right. So if you look at page 7 of 8 in your building department, and we budgeted $42,770 for that, it's exactly 65% of your revenue page for building permits, which is $65,800.
I guess my thought is if we get people that are not inspectors to come in, to have somebody else take a look to see if when people are handing in applications for building permits, that in fact their application meets all of our code requirements.
May I jump in on this, because
Right.
that was my 13-page wonder? There's a fee you can charge for doing that, and so it can be a wash. So if you have a very complex restructure, a new building or something, you have an entire set of plans that are being reviewed, you charge that review fee to either they do it from the outside and they contract it out, or we contract it out, depending on how it's done. For the master permit, there's a review section, and in that review section, that fee is part of that. Some cities are around $600 to do it. So let's say you're doing a brand new huge addition on your house, and you're putting in almost a whole new building, or you're putting on an extra 50 to 60% of square footage onto it. Then those plans then have to be reviewed by a structural engineer. Sometimes if they're very complicated and you're doing a master permit and there's multiple sections, you pass that cost on to directly onto them. And
I guess what I'm thinking of is maybe it's even a little bit more complicated than that. Let's say somebody put something in and in fact there's not enough parking on property for it. Where does that come in?
I think one of the things that was done in this budget that I'm very pleased with is we've added another part-time code officer to help with the issue of violations of everything, but included in that is building. What I have a question for you on, which is similar to what you're going at, is there enough money? One of the things that we have done historically, we've had part-time building officials, essentially, or after-hour building officials. And that is a great challenge for this community. When you want them here, whenever we have a boom of construction, you want them to be able to pop in, and they're able to do that and check out what's going on, not just calls for inspection. I want to make sure that's funded here. So let's say we happen to have a problem contractor, hypothetically speaking.
Okay, are you asking for a full-time building official to be on site all the time?
No.
Okay.
What I'm asking for is if, for example, let's say we end up, because we have always contracted these services.
Right.
But as part of that contractual service isn't just going around and doing the inspections and fees, it's also checking to make sure things are being done properly. Rather than having a building clerk go out and look, having the building official be driving around periodically in the village to make sure the sites are in compliance. So more of a compliance monitoring function, because our code officer, that expertise is very specific to South Florida Building Code.
Absolutely, yeah, our code officer is not equipped to go
Right.
out unless there's something egregious and obvious.
Did
guess-
I capture that?
No, because what
No.
I'm looking at is somebody puts in a permit, they want to build, well, we have one particular property that I do know of, where it was, I think, a 2-1 and a 1-1, and it changed to a 3-1 and a 2-1.
Correct, so it's a 5, I know which
It's a
property.
5,
Yep.
and there's no place to park. There's literally no, they don't have parking for anything.
Mhm.
There's also somebody I know that was issued a permit for a addition to their house with 5 workstations, 6 workstations. According to our code, you can't have employees working in your house. What would 6 workstations be there for? And in fact, it was passed.
I think there's a,
So there's somebody needs to look at stuff before it comes in, before it even goes to our boards to make sure, wait a second, this doesn't meet our codes.
there has to be a pre and a post, and I agree with them on that. There has to be the pre-review before it gets to the board to make sure what they're planning is even within the code. The structural sound, there's the structural side, there's the in compliance with with our code. And then there's, once P&Z does it, to make sure that nothing was done that would create an issue subsequent to that, because we've had those issues as well. I can think of a fencing issue, which is a pretty simple one, where they allowed something to happen that is against code. And I don't think it's intended, but we do have community boards, and not everybody's an expert in everything, but whoever our building official is needs to know our code. And so there's going to be that type of thing, and I just want to make sure we have enough budget for that.
Yeah, that was something that John had said, I was talking to John about it. He said, yeah, you can have somebody come and do the pre-stuff to make sure that before it even goes to the boards, to make sure that it does meet our code.
Well, we could have the building official review them all
I'm
prior,
not sure
but I
if
mean,
that's,
It depends on what it is.
yeah, because the building officials know structural stuff. I'm not sure if they're that,
Depending.
yeah.
The building official, and this is one of the advantages as we're moving forward to discuss this later, is what kind of building contractual services we're going to have and what depth we have. Because really, you call people in, if it's a group that has the expertise and the depth, you may need a structural and you may need electrical. It depends on what it is. So I want to make sure that whatever contractual services we end up hiring has that depth to call in the expert of that plan. Because not every plan's the same. You may have a structural person, you may have a roofing person that's doing attachment. It's very, it may be a floor level, whether or not they did the foundation correctly, whether or not the walls attached correctly, that's all structural. But you may have plumbing, you may have electric, you don't know. So one of the concerns I have is I want to make sure we're stopping this before it starts. Because what's happening right now is a lot of work is going on. They're delivering materials, they're working without permits, they're doing all sorts of things that we have to catch them after the fact, and then we have to clean up, and it's twice and 3 times as much work and cost to the village. So I want to make sure up front we had that cost put on through the master permitting process. They're not allowed to do anything or start or anything until everything's reviewed. It then goes to P&Z for the appropriate venues that P&Z looks at it for, aesthetics and some of the things we talked about. And then afterwards, if there's any other change orders, it goes through that same process. I just want to make sure we have enough expertise to do that in your contractual service. And I honestly, the problem we have here is we may end up with a budget amendment on this, because at the end of the day, until we have a construction ordinance, until we have a lot of other things in place, this is a bit premature.
there's a lot of moving pieces here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, the reality is, it's pretty simple. If someone's putting, if someone has a 2-bedroom house with a garage and they're enclosing the garage, and you can pretty much tell if they're going to need structural, they're going to need some electrical. If there's that little room off the garage, they're probably putting in a bathroom, they're going to need plumbing.
But then there's parking, landscaping, and that driveway
Well,
and
and
all
see,
that.
but we don't have,
Right,
yeah, we don't have code that
Right.
addresses that yet, so that's one of those moving parts.
right. But that's part of the problem right now.
I
is
mean, if you
because-
want to add to the budget, for professional services to boost that up a little bit,
I'd like to see it boosted up a bit. I do.
to what number? would you-
20,000. More,
How much?
20,000 more.
20,000 more?
I'm not even sure. But I have no idea what some of the things that we want would possibly cost. I
Or
don't know.
could we earmark contingency for that? I'm not, we have enough depth right now in our budget that I think, or we can just wait until you do it and do an amendment. I'm not, I'd like to at least see some money aside in case you need it.
We have a $50,000 contingency built in here already, so.
I'd
I
like to
mean,
see half of that
it's-
earmarked for any type of code and building issues that you need at this point, because that's where our biggest issues are, correct?
I mean, at this point, if you'd like, I mean, remember, we still have $212,000 that aren't earmarked for anything yet. So we can put $20,000 in here if you prefer that.
I'm
It
happy
just-
with, I'm happy
If we
with
don't
putting
spend
it
it,
in
it just
for-
goes back to reserves, which is where it is.
That's
anyway.
fine.
If we don't use it, we don't use it, so.
I have no problem. Is there?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
The building department statutorily, it's supposed to be self-sufficient.
That's what I'm,
Right.
yeah.
So if we're going to increase the expense by $20,000, there has to be an offsetting revenue.
Right. So I don't
So-
think we can do that right now.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I would advise against it. And, you know, if there's an increase and we're out of whack in the budget, then there's going to be an increase in the revenue as well. So we'll just amend the budget that way.
And we can change our permit structures to deal with that front end piece, which is the key. And I think maybe that's how we can address that so that it's statutorily appropriate. Right. Okay.
Because even in what we have in the budget for inspections, if somebody decides to hire their own inspector, we decrease the cost of the permits by that amount.
Right.
But when I spoke to the clerk about it, there is an apparently very laborious process to get to the point where you can do that. It's not any inspector can come in. And so that process has been in place for a long time, and we're not really seeing a lot of people doing it because they have to do paperwork, applications,
I'm
and
sure there are,
process.
yeah.
And so
People do it.
what the law changed this time around had to do with the reimbursement, that you can't charge them twice. So the inspection process being, the ability of somebody to hire them has always been there. What they changed was the ability to have us charge and them charge, so they would be charged twice. That's what the legislature took away. Okay. That's clear? Anything else?
I'm not sure where this would go in code compliance or in building. I'd love to see to put some money aside to have an urban planner come in and redo some of our codes as the code items come up. We've been notoriously bad news about writing codes.
That would probably go under administrative professional services.
So then maybe we need to, but we have a contingency in there, do we not? Or,
We do.
and we could always put more in there if we need it because we've saved so much on here. Because my thought is, that's what I'd really like to see is, having worked with a code, is having somebody write a code that, and I don't want to redo I'd love to redo the whole code.
Right.
Can't afford it. As the code items come up that we need to do, and the driveway one is a perfect example, we've been going on back and forth about this thing for 3 years. Have somebody who knows exactly what they're doing, take a look at it, and write it so it makes sense and it's all enforceable.
I know you've worked with, I would caution with partial rewrites. I think that's how we've gotten this mess in the first place. If we're going to spend the money, I'd rather see us get it done and get it done right all the way through.
Having worked on the code, it's unnecessary. Each portion of the code is completely individual. This came up once before with the adding plastic fences or something, and we went back and forth on it, and it really doesn't make a difference. What we need to do is make sure that whatever code we have, that's the report that we do. That takes precedent over anything else where that issue is mentioned anywhere else in the code.
Could you, at some point in your spare time, I just had to make him smile, could you find out what a total rewrite would cost and what individual ordinances give us an idea?
I actually met with Alex David from Calvin Giordano last week, and I
Okay.
asked him, just to throw me a ballpark. And it would be probably 80 to 100 for a total rewrite.
Okay, thank you.
For individual codes, it could be considerably less, like a 5 to 7 range. So, I mean, that may be worth checking out.
And assumably, with the attorney, if he's not going to be writing them and we're hiring somebody else to write the code, assumably some of that savings would go back on the other side, not totally. but-
Presumably.
Okay.
Never has. I'm sorry. Our attorney's fees a very low hourly rate, but we usually consume what we've set aside for him. I think it's $60,000 every year, and it hasn't changed. 70 for the time I've been here, it hasn't changed. So I wouldn't consider any kind of cost savings on the
Offset.
other side.
Okay.
Anything on code compliance? I think there was one mention, I think you had a mention, manager, on page 3 of 15. You had mentioned something to me on that.
Absolutely, yes. I would like to, we talked about hiring an additional part-time code officer, and I would like to boost that up from, I think we had 18,540 in there, boost it up just to 21,000.
And that was for, what, about 3 days approximately?
It would be, yeah, about 3 days
About 3 days? Okay,
of labor.
Thank
So
you.
24 hours a week.
perfect. Thank you very much.
So
Wait.
this new part-time person, are they going to be out in the field? Are they going to need a car and a radio or a phone or a computer?
She will be out in the field. Hopefully, we're trying to work it out for her to be here on days when Elizabeth is not here, like Fridays and Sundays. And that would give us coverage on those days. Additionally, she has about 15 years of code experience and 3 or 4 years of 2 years, I think, of code manager experience and supervisory experience. So I also want to use her indoors administratively to help us get organized and get everything, running smoothly so that we actually have the foundation in place, and Linda's head's going to pop in just
I
about a
just
minute.
wanted to thank Linda, because I know, I don't know if all you know, but for the folks out there, she has been invaluable in helping, and I cannot thank her enough for everything she has done, not only with code, and Janie as well, yes. But thank you all so much for tremendous work that you've done.
But Commissioner Ross, additionally, we won't need an additional car for her. We can use the admin car as well, should they both be here simultaneously. And so we do have a vehicle. And so
And computer equipment, anything else?
That can be shared.
Other tools that are going to be needed?
yeah,
Shared?
that can be shared. And so-
Anything else? I think I already mentioned on page 8 of 15, so I'm just going to make sure that you make a note of that to see how we're going to, just to make sure that there's the ability for you to put that in whatever department, building, or code it belongs in as you figure out who the personnel is.
Okay.
And I know also with you have budgeted into a new car, a lease for something like a nice green car, I think we talked about. But then if the other car is there, that would still allow two eventually if the car didn't completely die.
For the
It was
Ford
just
Ranger.
Yeah, if it was
that
just
we
limping
currently
and you
have.
needed two cars, right?
Right.
Okay. Knock on wood. Okay, number 9, Public Works. We kind of did that tonight.
We did that tonight, yeah. So
Okay.
I think we're done.
And, okay, so you're doing the position, yeah, okay. I think we did that. Is there anything else? Comments? Because we kind of went through everything. Is there anything else anybody wants to add or go? And let me just make sure poor Vice Mayor's been sitting here. Vice Mayor, is there anything else you want to add on the budget?
No, nothing for me.
Okay.
So I will incorporate the changes that we spoke about tonight, and you just tell me your preference on how you would want this redone. I mean, do you want the paper copies? I know you want them double-sided. Do you want emailed copies? How would you like to see it for your budget presentation?
I have to have both, because when I'm trying to run the meeting, there's no other way for me to do it. I've tried it with the electronic, it doesn't work for me.
Okay.
So for me, hard copy, I'd like it also electronically, just so I have it, but I definitely will need a hard
And do
copy.
you want the worksheets again, or do you want just the summary pages?
I like the worksheets.
You like the worksheets?
Yep.
Okay.
I think it's actually, what I was going to do is just bring my book back in sometime during the week.
That'd
Please
be
do.
great.
So
And
you
you
can
can
see the
recycle
binder.
them, that'd be
Yeah,
great.
we'll bring
Yeah.
back in the old ones, that's fine.
Yeah.
We'll bring them back on. I have no problem with that.
I could do without the individual, FICA, FRS worksheets. I don't know that we need that. But since this is going to be the next budget is going to be the one that is sort of presented to the, for public viewing, I think it would be very beneficial for the public to have a description or somehow capture the duties and the purpose of each department, what areas they cover, so that as they read through it, they'll have an understanding of what
Okay,
their money's supporting.
we can do that.
Yeah,
I know we've done it in past budgets.
Yes, I've seen that, so.
Yeah.
Okay, is there a motion?
Also, I'm sorry, just one last thing. If we could have like a pie chart of this is the revenue, this is where it comes from, this is the expenditures, and this is how it goes, so people can understand that a majority of our money that goes out for public safety. Because I think that that's something that they value and they'll, feel good about it.
Okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Workshop adjourned.